Welcome to the May 18th meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I would like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item or project and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak, and at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only, and not to the applicant or the audience, and please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commission discusses each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and the results of voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issues arise in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, 1 or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, the supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, plan unit developments, PUDs. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please turn off or silence all your cell phones at this time. And commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphones when speaking. Roll call. Ms. Libby Latham. Here. Carlos Gant here. Ms. Jennifer Denson. Here. Mr. John Vallis. Ms. Shirley Sessions. Here. Mr. Thomas Doyle. Here. Mr. Taylor Atchison. Here. Ms. Keena Andrews. Here. Mr. Nick Omberger. Here. Ms. Bessrich. Here. Mr. Don Humbry. Here. Mr. Alan Cameron. Here. We have a quorum. We'll begin with item number 1 under our holdovers. It's 3450 Gerby Road. This item is recommended for holdover until the June 1st meeting. Is the applicant present? This will probably be granted. At such time, we will hear from those for and against as well. But if you are here and you want to speak for this or against this, you are welcome to at this time. Item number 2, west side of South University Boulevard, 305 south of Old Shell Road, Wells Ventures. Applicant present.
William Laddock, Clark Ear Latham & Associates. My client would like to withdraw this application from consideration.
Okay, thank you. This item has been withdrawn from consideration. Item number 3, north side of Providence Park Drive South, east of Cody. It's in 2 parts, plan unit development and subdivision. Both parts are recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Is there anyone here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? please come down.
My name's Mike Damoff, and I'm with the Highland Park Lakeview West Community Association. And we really had trouble figuring out where this site is, but I see that's where it says site, that's where it is.
Yes, sir.
What's going to happen around the rest of the lake?
Until an application is submitted, it is going to remain as it exists today,
And
because
And we're concerned about runoff. As you know, across the street there is Optimus Lake, which we have been fighting to keep the dam in place, and we're concerned that about stormwater runoff. Is the stormwater runoff going to go into the Providence Holding Pond there? Or is it going to run out into the street?
Mr. Davis, can you answer that question, please?
Would you repeat that question, sir? I didn't hear.
Where is the stormwater runoff going to go on that project?
From this site, I think the engineer said that it runs to the existing detention pond on the facility.
Okay. You happen to know how much water you expect to dump in that pond?
I have no idea, sir.
Well, I figure 2.5 acre site, I believe that's right, isn't it? It's 2.5 acres, the project, that it'll dump approximately 500 gallons of water if it rains 1 inch. It'll dump into that holding pond.
Sir, I think when he gets a chance to respond, their engineer on the site can address it. Whenever the pond was constructed, and this is just a general statement that their engineer may be able to go into some more detail for you, but that pond was sized to cover that whole area being developed out at a future date. So right now, the retention pond that you see, can you go to the aerial photo? Yeah, the retention pond that's right there was sized such that to handle all the rest of the development when any of that other land around there was built out.
Well, it seems inadequate because if you go over there after a really big storm, that water is 2 foot, 3 foot above the top of the pipe or where it runs off.
Yes, sir. It should have a structure on it that's designed to control the release of that water, and that pond is going to build up in a rain event. It's going to build up, but the release downstream to Optimus Lake or any of the other infrastructure is controlled to what it was at a pre-development condition.
Okay. All right. Do I have anything else? Well, you can see our concern that, every time another business is built or permitted, all that water runs into our lake from the airport to Mobile Terrace to Providence Hospital. And we're fighting that, keeping that dam intact right now, so we're concerned about
I certainly understand
runoff.
that, and what's very common on these larger developments when they're built out like this is that they do, rather than each acre or 2 acre site having their own single retention pond, they'll develop one larger one, which you see here in their aerial photo, that addresses the entire thing. And in this case, I think they've also kind of halfway turned it into an amenity, that it's a pond there instead of just a depressed area.
Yeah.
The master plan, I think for that entire area, again, shows that pond was sized for the build-out of that entire area.
Well, it seems to be a worse problem every year. I mean, when you get retention ponds dumping water into the watershed of Milkhouse Creek and other streams, the water goes up and up on our spillway and our dam.
Perhaps their engineer might want
So-
to speak to you after this and explain it
Yeah,
in a little bit
well,
more detail.
Well, we'll address it one day, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here to speak against? You can come to the mic, please.
I'm Kathy O'Keefe. I live in Regency. It's just a follow-up question to that one because I've been in other situations where once developers finish the entire thing and dissolve their corporations or leave, then the question is who then is responsible if something does happen and that pond overflows. So just for the record, could somebody say in the future when these sites are developed and this holding pond is still there and the dam is still there, if something is breached or something fails or the water does overflow in ways that are not anticipated, who would be the responsible party liability-wise and for the repair of that structure if the developers have dissolved their corporation?
Do you know who that is?
I don't,
Yes, ma'am.
I can't answer that question. That's an excellent question. But if I understand this application, this is part of the Providence Park PUD, which was a huge PUD that came in, but obviously they just did, they wait till someone comes in, wants to look at a certain size lot. So, and the city doesn't get into the fact whether this is going to be like purchased outright or whether they're going to lease back from the hospital as a, project, because that's not something the city gets into. But if the applicant is here, if we could hear from the applicant, I'd really appreciate it about as far as what exactly is before this commission this minute for what's being proposed. And I know that the entire site is in the red, which means B3, but each one would be a different application coming under the master plan that gets amended each time. So I don't remember, I wasn't here for the original master plan that was adopted I wasn't a planning commissioner. So if we could just hear a little something, that would probably help the residents too.
Joe Azarisi and Associates. I'd be glad to address the question. This will be a doctor's office that will be owned by Providence Hospital.
Okay.
And again, the stormwater from this site will be released into the existing detention pond that was approved previously.
It's currently owned and maintained by Providence Hospital?
That is correct, and will continue to be maintained.
I think that was your question, ma'am.
So in other words, it's still, even though it's a subdivision within that original planning approval, it's still under the application of Providence Hospital.
That's correct.
So as far as who would maintain, it would be Providence Hospital at this point until things change.
Yep.
The owner will not be Providence Hospital.
Oh, it will not be.
I'll be the owner.
Oh, okay.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah, the Providence is leasing it. They own the property today, so they're the applicant. But the way the format is, the applicant needs to be the owner, so that's why Providence is.
Mr.
the
Thomas,
applicant.
could you give your name and address for the
Oh, I'm sorry,
record?
Merrill Thomas, Merrill P. Thomas Company, 6 Drury Lane, Mobile. I'm sorry.
Mr. Thomas, do the restrictive covenants for the subdivision address ownership and maintenance of the pond? I mean, this is almost like a business-type neighborhood association as opposed to a residential association. Do your covenants of the land address that?
With Providence.
Good afternoon, I'm Lee Metzger. I've been coming down here on this project since 1987. I am the Regional Director of Real Estate for Ascension Health. The Providence Hospital has been in Mobile for 163 years. I hope we'll be here for another 163. The pond, as you accurately represented, was designed to absorb all the runoff from all of the area that is in and around Providence Park Drive. There is a second pond that is actually south of the intersection at Providence Park Drive and Cody Road that serves Providence Estates and some of the other commercial property that's within Providence Park. So when the original design was done by Rester and Coleman back in the mid-'80s and submitted to the city, the calculation for that lake, which is 3.2 acres, was for it to handle all of the runoff for all of those other parcels. It was done so that it would be an aesthetic improvement and also to be efficient for the operation of the park. There are provisions in every one of the deeds and all of the land in Providence Park, including Providence Estates, whereby the maintenance of that pond becomes the responsibility of all of the ownership within Providence Park. So there is provision for just that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions by commissioners?
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 4, under extensions, south side of Howes Ferry Road at south terminus of Harvey Hill. It's recommended for a 1-year extension be approved. The applicant present. Anyone here else to speak for this? Anyone to speak against? Thank you. New subdivision applications. Item number 5, 7225 Old Pascagoula Road. This application is recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? No. Yeah, could you please come?
Les Coburn, Coburn Construction, 4813 Tufts Road. I'm basically building a warehouse at this lot here that recently bought. It currently has 2 driveways. I get large deliveries every day. I do gas station signage, what have you. And I would like for the board to recommend for me to keep the 2 driveways that's currently there for safety of the people, the right-of-way. Basically, the trucks come in on my lot, unload, pull straight back out, just like a big U-turn.
Any comments from traffic?
This property, excuse me, this property is in the county, so that comment didn't originate from traffic engineering. It's 200 feet of frontage. Would you think that it would be like one-way driveways? Could you do 2 one-way driveways? That's kind of equivalent to what we typically, I mean, that's something that y'all can consider if you wanted it that, but it's 200 feet of right-of-way, so it's, or frontage, so it's theoretically possible to have 2.
Which it is, yes. And like I said, there's currently 2 driveways there, so.
Okay, is there anything else, sir?
That's all.
Any questions
Are you
by
wanting to maintain the
committee?
2 existing driveways?
I'm sorry?
Are you wanting to maintain the 2 existing driveways?
I will, yes.
Current locations? The current locations,
What do you mean, what current?
where the two current driveways are?
Oh, where I'm at now?
Yes.
4813 Tufts Road?
No. The,
Oh, where are they at?
Yeah.
Oh, they're basically at each end of the property.
you want to,
We will keep them there. We wouldn't change them whatsoever.
okay, that's what.
Yeah, besides, I think we've got to widen one a little bit, but yeah, they would stay where they're at, yes,
Okay,
sir.
all right.
But are you okay with the one way in and one way out?
It would be difficult for rigs to try to get in, and, I mean, I get the largest rigs there is, because we get 30-foot signs, so it would be difficult. We could do it, but it
No,
wouldn't be easy.
she meant, can it be a one-way drive? You come in one end and go out the other, which is
It'd
what
be
you're
hard
asking
to.
for.
Yeah, it would be hard too. It basically, if they could come in on the current driveways, come in, just make a unload and go straight back out the other side of the property. Would
Okay.
be great.
That's one,
Right, so one driveway, they would be coming in, and that would be kind of an in
Absolutely,
only,
one
and
in
then
and
the
one
other
out.
would be
That is-
out only?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Oh, so they are one-way.
I see, yeah.
okay. Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 6, recused by Ms. Latham. 9885 Name and Loop. This item is recommended for tentative approval, subject to staff recommendations. Is the applicant present?
Hi, Paul Stewart, Stewart Surveying in Mobile. We would like to ask Juanita Street, which has a 50-foot right-of-way, remain 50 feet. It's a dead-end road, dead end to the bay. It's a house on both sides, there's soon to be 2 on the south side. And we'd just like to remain 50 feet just because it can't see it ever being developed or extended.
Staff?
The request or recommendation for dedication is because this is not a curb and gutter street, and those streets require a minimum 60-foot right-of-way, 30 feet from center line. So that's why the staff is recommending that dedication.
Okay. Any questions by commissioners? Okay, sir, we'll take it up in deliberation.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak for this application? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 7, 9315 Talking Leaves Lane. This item is recommended for denial. Is the applicant present? Are you?
Millard Austin, Austin Engineering. The application was recommended for denial for a couple of reasons. We, a couple of days ago, sent a letter to the staff explaining that we do have public water and the lots meet the minimum lot size for health department requirements. Matter of fact, the health department has already approved an additional septic tank. And the reason for the flag lot is because the owners wish to give their son the back lot to build a new one-family resident home. And with that explanation, we'd like to request that it be approved.
Comments from staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have conditions. Mr. Austin's correct. We did receive the information. We do have conditions prepared. Just to note, if we had received all of the information with the submission of the application, the recommendation would have been different.
Okay. Any questions by commissioners?
The main issue that I see, I was just curious about, was where the flagpole access is going to the back lot. It looks like that easement, the width of that easement, how wide is that?
25 feet.
Is that encroaching upon the footprint where the house is actually sitting?
Encroaching on what, I'm
Where
sorry?
the house is actually sitting?
Oh, no, that was probably drawn from a aerial. No, the house is further over toward the west, I guess.
Okay, because the map we have here, it looks like that easement is going about a quarter of the way into where the house is.
No, it's about 25 or 30 feet from there, from that.
Okay.
Mr. Hembry, if I may, our maps are kind of a combination of the county tax assessor base map and aerial photos. The structures are generally from aerial photos, and those two maps do not always scale exactly the same. So you'll see in many instances on our maps, and there's no way to actually correct it on every property. But
How far that corner of the house right there from the property line?
It's at least 20 feet.
So it's not wider than the easement. That's what this question was, is your easement included?
Did you get a copy of the conditions? Yeah. You want to look at these and tell us whether or not you're in agreement with them?
Oh, all the rest of the comments we agree with.
Well, this is something new.
Oh.
yeah, those are recommended conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, might want to look them over.
Let me put on my eyeballs.
Could you review the conditions while we move forward, and then when we come to deliberation, we can ask you if you have an issue with them?
I have no further comment.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 8, 12388 Airport Boulevard, recommended for tentative approval, subject to staff recommendations. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement? Applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 9, 250 Chatham Street, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in favor of staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in favor of staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one thing to note that we just kind of was brought to our attention. The site is located in the Oakley Historic District, and within the historic districts, we have what is called the Historic District Overlay, and it allows setbacks equal to structures within 150 feet. So instead of the 25-foot front setback, we would suggest that you consider amending that to say setbacks in accordance with the historic district overlay.
All right, we'll take that into consideration.
Which item number would that be, Richard?
Number 6.
It's Old Dolphin Way.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak against this application? Item number 10, 5200 Schillinger Road South, 5215 and 5217 Roswell Road. Item is recommended for approval, subject to staff recommendations. Applicant present in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 11, north and south side of Pearson Drive, Legacy at Saybrook Subdivision. It's recommended for approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 12, west side of Dolphin Island Parkway, extending 120 feet east, Dolphin Creek Estate Subdivision. This is recommended for holdover. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with that holdover? Okay. Applicant is present, is in agreement with the holdover. It will probably be granted at that time. The opportunity will be given to speak for or against this application. But if anyone else is here to speak for or against it, they are welcome to at this time. Item number 13, under new plan unit development applications.
Mr. Gann is recused. This is 4410 Birchwood Drive East. The applicant present, in agreement with the recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this? Is there anyone?
Madam Chair, John Williams with the Mobile City Council, representing this area. The last time that this plan unit development was before the commission, there was a allowed access at Nob Hill. That was done without the residents being fully aware of that action. It has been discussed several times between our office, the residents, and the administration in Mobile, what might be done there. And this is one of those times when the Planning Commission can make that access that hasn't been opened in 50 years. It was stubbed off from the south side of Crestview neighborhood. We're talking about Nob Hill. You will notice comments about it in the traffic engineering comments that talks about essentially reversing the last decision to allow access at Nob Hill to now disallowing under certain conditions. It would be my request to the commission if you would consider, for the purpose of traffic safety, the safety of that community, that we not allow and essentially disallow access to Nob Hill by any development, including this one. Again, that is not a gate. It is not an open area. It's not a right-of-way. There is trees and a fence across that stub out that abuts this development. So I would simply ask that you, as part of this review, deny access to Nob Hill. You will find a letter that was sent to me today that I asked to be forwarded to y'all, part of your packet, from the neighborhood organization that is asking that if this is, if the request through me today is not granted, that the city council take action. And I think you, I would like to see that done here in the right body and the right decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
I have a question, if that's okay. On our site map, are you saying where it comes into what would be Regency Drive? Because you're calling it Nob Hill, and I can't, that's what the
No,
neighborhood's called?
It goes into
Yeah.
Regency.
Okay. It's
Excuse me, it
not
goes into
labeled then.
Crestview subdivision.
Okay.
There are three, there's the address that is given as part of this application.
Okay.
Birchwood. It's over by IMS and being pointed to now. That's Birchwood. There's a gate there that's owned by the church, and it is open now.
Okay.
It is the one that that neighborhood uses to go to the voting place or go to their place of worship.
Okay,
There are
that's-
three accesses off of Halls Mill Road. There is one, two by the church, and then another that goes to the sports fields. And so I'm asking that we do not allow a fifth access at Nob Hill.
Okay, I just didn't see the term on our map, so
This would be a
I want to
straight-
make sure and then do you see that as creating a cut-through if it is?
It would be yes, ma'am, it would be an absolute straight cut through from Highway 90.
Right.
A straight cut through, and one that you wouldn't have to use a map. Turn on Nob Hill and just blaze away. I've asked for a number of things on Nob Hill, and I think that this is only going to exacerbate our problem as we control traffic in that subdivision
Okay.
already.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Bert, can you show us what Nob Hill is again?
Right there. It doesn't say, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is there currently access at Birchwood? Is that open for
Gated.
traffic or?
Yes, there is a gated access to Birchwood that is used, as Mr. Williams said, by the neighborhood to go to the church either for worship or as a voting precinct.
Okay.
The note as it reflects now, note number 4, where it says revision the site plan to depict the proposed gate, blocking access to Nob Hill with adequate room for queuing space, and note that the gate must be locked when the facility is not in use. Was there intent to have a gate there that was only open when the church is that in session?
When this site came up previously, when we were still meeting in the ceremonial courtroom, there was at one point a recommendation from the staff that access to Nob Hill be denied. During one of the meetings, the applicant requested that that condition be removed. The commission did not indicate that they were opposed to that, so in the staff recommendation at the following meeting, we removed that condition because there was no opposition expressed by the commission of the request from the applicant. So in essence, they were allowed access to Nob Hill. Now, it's being requested formally that that access that was previously allowed by not denying it, it be denied at this point. And that does, and that does allow the access, so basically that both of those would need to be changed to deny it if that's the commission's prerogative.
Yeah, because if you read the recommendations that once the improvements are made, to make sure you open it. And that's what they're wanting to do, is add parking. So I think we've heard clear that that's going to pose a problem if it's opened. So doesn't mean they can't do their parking internal. No one's talking about that. Okay.
Can we hear from the applicant? You know, is the applicant here?
Jerry Bird, Bird Surveying Company for the applicant, which, not totally familiar. It was recommended for approval. He was happy with it. He's out of town. He asked me to see if I could deal with it. Purpose of this application was purely to allow off-site parking until September 30th this year, so that he could operate a day camp in the gymnasium located at school site. They would be able to park over on church property have permission. And of course, had to submit everything. It gets reviewed, and now it looks like, but what I read about Nob Hill, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think you would be driving on Nob Hill if it wasn't paved. And I thought it said should be modified to a nightlight access until the permanent surface be placed for the parking and access on the northern portion, which he has told me that he was talking to an engineer to design that parking. Are they driving through on unpaved surface? Well, I mean, that's not a issue, is it? I mean,
There's a fence right now. They're not driving through at this point.
yeah.
But, you know, another thing is if you look at the site plan and PUDs and planning approval or site plan specific,
Right.
there is no access shown connecting to Nob Hill.
Okay.
So denial of access to Nob Hill would be in conformance with the site plan as submitted.
Doesn't change anything.
All right. Well then, yeah. I'm sure he didn't want to lose that access when he paves the parking lot,
Yeah.
if at all possible.
Yeah, and Mr. Hoffman reminded me that part of the request was specifically to keep or have access to Nob Hill. So,
But a PUD's not supposed to have a negative effect on surrounding areas, and we're hearing that this could easily cause that. So we had to use our judgment.
right, because there was no opposition at the previous meetings.
Thank you.
And again, his site plan does not show any kind of access, connecting point from his proposed parking lot to Nob Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? Thank you very much. Number 14.
New group applications. Number 14, 363 South Royal and 378 Old Water Street. Two parts, both are recommended for approval. Subject to staff recommendation. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 15.
Mr. Gand is recused on item number 15, 1270 and 1272 Pecan Street. The application for subdivision is recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present?
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Wadier with Wadier Surveying and representing New Hope Baptist Church. The pastor and another elder is also here with us today. It's it's recommended for approval, so I'm not going to bore you with, the whole history of this project. But basically, in 2011, the church began the process of expanding their building and parking facilities. And we made some applications here that were approved for that. Came back in 2014 and got an approved PUD, planning approval and subdivision. At that time, the building construction was begun, and the building itself has been constructed. So now the church is desiring to move on and construct the parking lot. Since 2014, the church acquired more property, so the parking lot layout that we're requesting approval on today is slightly different than what was approved in 2014. At the very last minute, with some last-minute title search, we discovered a 5-foot alleyway that does not show on the tax assessor records, and it does not show on the subdivision plat for this neighborhood. And in fact, it was created by deed. I gave Bert today a supplemental drawing that each of you should have that illustrates the 5-foot alleyway with a deed reference of where it was created. Now, the alleyway creation was back in the 40s, but it has not been used in decades. The pastor of the church has been pastor there, if I remember right, 32 years, I believe, and he had no idea. I mean, he grew up in the area, he's been pastor there. He had no idea that there was any kind of an alleyway there. There is no physical alleyway. The lot on the south side, the Beacon Street lot, actually the driveway, there's a dwelling located on that lot, and their driveway is located within this 5-foot alleyway. So it's like, you know, back in the 40s, it was created maybe to be a pedestrian thoroughfare, but then it was kind of forgotten about, you know, as time went on. Nonetheless, it's there. You know, it's in documents that are recorded at probate court, and we need to deal with that. So what we're proposing to do with that, if you look on the supplemental drawing that we provided today, we're proposing to vacate the portion of that alleyway in the area where we would like to construct the parking lot. In the middle of that alleyway, you'll see a piece of property that's labeled State Board of Education. The church has tried to acquire that property and has had difficulty getting anyone at the State Board of Education to pay attention. And the State Board of Education didn't even know they owned it until we told them they did. And it was actually willed to them. Somebody passed away and willed that to the Board of Education. So we, you know, the church would like to acquire that at some point in the future, but we've just had difficulty coordinating and, you know, making that happen. So our desire is to leave the 5-foot easement where it's adjacent to that Board of Education property, or I said easement, but actually alleyway, and leave the alleyway extending south down to Pecan Street, which would, you know, provide, albeit it's only 5 feet wide, but it does provide access to that State Board of Education property. So if we look at the recommendations, the subdivision recommendations, item number 1 is removal of the 5-foot alley or provision of documentation. So on the sketch that we provided, there's documentation of the deeds that create the alleyway. Condition number 2 will go away on the subdivision itself. Condition number 4 is provision of an access easement to the landlocked parcel. Well, when the recommendations were written, the staff believed that that was a landlocked parcel. Actually, it's technically not, because it does have a 5-foot alley that provides access there. So we would like to request that we not be required to provide access to that parcel, since we are going to plan on not vacating, you know, the alleyway that provides access right now. One more request. We would like to have permission to be able to pull building permits and begin construction simultaneously with the vacation process, because it could take, you know, maybe 3 months, maybe longer to work through the vacation process, and we don't want the construction of the parking lot held up, you know, while we're working through that. So with that, I'll ask if anybody has any questions.
For clarification, you're requesting that item number 1, 2, and 4 be removed?
Yes.
Staff?
I have a question for the staff. Is a 5-foot alley sufficient for access to a landlocked parcel?
The regs don't specify on existing what the access has to be. I mean, it's obviously sufficient for pedestrian access, but that would be it.
What do you typically see in terms of provision of access easements?
Normally, it is for vehicular access. I can't address how the school board would ever potentially use this property, or if they ever would, given its location in the middle of a block with no support area for parking or any other facilities.
Richard, could you address his request to remove items 1, 2, and 4?
One, as he stated, has been met. He provided the documentation about the alley. 2, I'm sorry, I got lost here. Number 2, I was looking at the wrong thing. Number 2 on the subdivision is not really an issue either at this point. The only other one that would potentially be an issue would be if there were an opinion that there was more access needed for that piece of property. And that would be up to the commission to make that determination. I think that's...
On the alley issue and the vacation, he called me a couple of days ago and gave me some information about this. I think it's probably, private, not a public alleyway. I don't think it was ever accepted by the city, so I'm not sure he'd have to go through the complete vacation process. But for his purposes, he can continue or proceed with construction. If he vacates it, then he can block that access to that lot behind him. If he leaves it as it is, he can pave that parking lot. He just can't put a curb blocking access to that. So I see no problem with him proceeding with construction. We don't need to require him to vacate it. He can leave it there or get rid of it with the budding property owners.
Why wouldn't you be able to construct a curb for pedestrian access on a 5-foot alley?
It's just, I would not want him to have anything that would block access. It doesn't, the deed that creates alleyway doesn't say pedestrian, I don't think. It says an alleyway, a motorcycle, a golf cart, wheelchair. So, just legally, he shouldn't block it if it's still in existence.
When this, if I may, Richard, when this first came to us several weeks ago in the engineering department, there was a request to pursue this with a non-utility use agreement. Right. And we felt like because of the restrictions associated with a non-utility use agreement that required insurance, recording and running with the land and renewing of that, that the appropriate thing for them to do was to go through the vacation process to clean that parcel up once and for all. And we're very comfortable with going ahead and issuing the associated land disturbance permits while the vacation process is continuing. Okay.
And Ms. Andrews, going back to your question, if they were creating this alley, it would need to be 20 feet. But since it is existing, we can't, it's...
If I might note too, there's one other conflict that might need to get cleared up, because I believe based on the items 1 and 2 with leaving that one track out, item number 5 limits the curb cut to Persimmon to 1. and traffic engineering has 2. Right now, they're showing a driveway in the very near proximity of that alley. So it might be best if that is either changed to site or something, that if it's going to be 2 separate parcels where the church is and the parking is and the alley separates the 2, it might need to be some kind of distinction of that the second property that isn't going to be part of the subdivision that's on the east side of the alley is allowed to have a curb cut as well. If that's not confusing enough.
Yeah, the PUD drawing, the plan is to have one driveway that comes into what's shown as Lot A, you know, on the western side, and then to have a second driveway that is on that property east of the alleyway. So we would have 2 curb cuts on the persimmon. So technically, the subdivision comment would be right in that Lot A would have 1 curb cut, and, you know, that would meet the subdivision requirement, but there is a second curb cut on that property east.
Thank you, Mr. Whittier. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? Is anybody here to speak in opposition to this? All right, we will move on to number 16.
Item number 16, 1109 Government Street. Government Street subdivision, 2 parts, PUD and subdivision, both are recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 17, 5900 Cottage Hill.
There is an opposition.
I'm sorry, sir.
I'm Ed Massey, and I live at 1066 Church Street. And I am vehemently against this because we live in a historical district. We have expended great sums of money in the effort to maintain the integrity of that historical district. And this proposed re-subdivision will add multiple family dwellings, will increase traffic on Church Street, and generally disrupt the nature of the historical district. And I think that the commission should thoughtfully consider the impact that this will have on the neighborhoods and on the attempts of the city to portray the historical district in the manner in which it has been portrayed, and it is the efforts that are going forth to keep it in that perspective.
Any questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here to speak against this? Does the applicant want to respond to the comment?
While he's walking down, I have a question for staff. This is simply an application to divide this existing parcel into 3 parcels with the existing structures that are already in place on each of those separate 3 parcels, correct?
Yes, sir.
Merlin Miller with McCrory and Williams. I believe the question was pertinent. This is really a housekeeping issue of current use of the property. There's no new construction planned at this time, and anything that would be done in the future would come back for review. and simply cleaning up the current use of the property.
Okay, thank you, sir. Item number 17, 5900 Cottage Hill Road. It is recommended that we hear what you have to say.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mark Irwin, E-R-W-I-N. My home is 6632 Sugar Creek Drive. I'm here as a member of the Board of Trustees of the school. The application is for lighting for our on-campus softball field. This can be seen there in the depiction of the aerial view. This is sort of the last element of a large-scale athletic complex upgrade that we've been undertaking for the last several years, which included several years ago actually completely rotating the present softball field 180 degrees from what its previous orientation was on the property, rebuilding the dugouts, press box, and this would be the final step in the completion of our softball complex. I'm proud to say that if approved, we expect that this field would be the first high school outdoor athletic field in the state of Alabama to utilize LED lighting for competition. And frankly, in addition to high school, it may be, other than the baseball facility at Auburn University and the baseball facility at the University of Alabama, may be the only other outdoor sports facility using LED lighting for competition. It's sort of straightforward as far as the requests we made. I think it's going to require 6 standards for the lighting, and the technical information is in the packet, but we also have the engineers here today in case there are questions about the specifications with regard to that. But we think that everything that we've presented is within order for the requirements of our master plan and does not create any undue burden or issues for any adjoining landowners. We already have 2 lighted fields that we utilize on the property. We are subject to restrictions and regulations with regard to those activities, and this would fit right into the same regulations that we operate under today.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you say you're using the LED lighting, and in a previous case that we had, it was mentioned that LED lights are dimmable. Is that the case with these lights that you'll be installing?
As far as I know, yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So then, could you meet the 0.2 foot candle limit, or what would the challenges be that you could not do that?
And I can't speak to the technical specifications. We could certainly have the engineer, but I did note that comment in the staff's explanation. I think our readings or submission indicated that there'd only be 1 or 2 places where that was even going to be an issue near the edge of the property, but that we could work with that limitation. I don't think we're going to be exceeding the specification. I don't know about dimming the lights to a certain level during competition. I don't know what the safety issue with that would be. But I will say this, one of the benefits that we foresee with the use of this lighting system would be the elimination of a lot of the stray light in and around the light standards. The lights would be very directed and dedicated to the field itself and not to spraying across the horizon. So I think that's going to be one of the benefits we hopefully realize in this system.
Mr. Irwin, Richard, if there was a package that they presented on the technical specification of the light, I don't think we received that. Is that something that you presented? And while we're getting that, I was curious, where are the light poles going to be placed? Because that's not shown on the site plan.
That's a great question. I think, as I understand it, there will be, I want to say 1 each on each foul line, kind of near the dugout area right now, and then 4 across the outfield area. coming back this direction. I think that's the way I understood the layout. It may be 2, 2, and 2, but I think it's 1 on each foul line and 4 across the outfield.
So you know it's a total of 6 poles.
I think that's what I appreciate.
Yeah, it would be helpful to know where the placement would be.
6 total. Do you have the specifications of the exact locations that we have intended to? I saw that on the information. I don't have it in front of me. I just.
Well, it's going to be hard for us all to look at that, so we have to deal with that, but Richard, could you look at that and tell us if it's meeting the requirements as far as the .2?
Along the east property line, as referenced in the report, it does not meet it. The highest level at the property line is 1.7 foot candles.
But your north, south, and west is not going to be an issue because that's all school property.
Right.
What type of vegetative buffer do we currently have on the east side?
Well, at the
It
location.
has been allowed to go for a good while. In fact, we were actually talking several weeks ago when we first made the submission. A new owner has purchased the house with the closest proximity to this spot that you're looking at and asked us to actually clean it because they were a little concerned about the overgrowth of the vegetative buffer. And so we actually did some trimming there at the owner's request on our side. They had trimmed some on their side, but it's been growing pretty much naturally since we did the reconfiguration of the ball field probably, was that 4 years, 6 years ago now? 6 years ago. So it's been kind of left to its own devices right there along the fence line.
But it's cleared now, but it could grow back?
It could grow back. It was, like I said, cleared at the owner's request on our side because they just.
Did they know about the improvements to the
You
ball
know,
field at the time they
That's
asked
a
for
great
that?
question, but I don't know how far back that request goes and when our application was made. You know, we've not had any questions or requests or letters or phone calls from the neighbors. We've reached out through both the postings and also with our own efforts to try to make sure everybody understands, our neighbors understand what we're trying to do.
And everyone within 300 feet of this site got the letter
They
about
did.
the application?
They did.
Sure.
You stated potential, safety concerns in terms of light levels during, like actual gameplay. But would it be feasible to, dim the lights during, the practices that are noted?
Well, obviously, we would be concerned about player safety regardless of whether they're practicing or playing. But I could say this, it would be easy enough for us to sort of have a standard as soon as competition is over, that either they're cleaning up or prepping the field for other activities, the things that might go on after a competition or practice, they could certainly have a level to take them down to as soon as the young ladies are done playing, so that we don't endanger any of them.
Okay.
Richard, one more time, you said our limit is .2, right?
Yes, sir.
And we're in that.
1.7 in roughly this area right here. There is a street stub that comes into the property right about here. The light standards, there's one approximately here, one here, one here, 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 and here.
So I would think that the two on the west side are the ones that would be causing the issue with.
If there is an issue, because generally they're going to be directed down onto the field, not out.
Yeah.
So, if there have to be any that are pointed in any way to the east, that's the best location for them to be.
Are there calculations as presented ever get to that .2 standard? Does it ever show it? Or
Yes, sir.
About where does that line fall?
Yeah, it does kind of out in here like this.
About 50 feet or so into the yard.
Approximately, yes, sir.
Okay.
So does it go all the way to the house? Does it show the light levels all the way to the residence?
It's about 40 feet into the yard, so If it does hit the residence, it just barely clips the back side of it.
And what is the light level at that point?
0.2.
Could we hear from your lighting contractor and just get some?
I have a question before that expert comes down, because I don't know if Mark can answer this. There was talk on this document that we're holding about 21 games. We talked about limiting the last time with another application, similar residential abutting a sports facility. Is that the number of maximum for this particular field that that's coming from your documentation or the
I think that was
applicant's?
what we would have requested for the use of this
Particular.
softball
Right, and that's all
facility.
we're talking about
Yes,
right
ma'am.
now.
That's correct.
So 21?
But lighting would only be needed to accommodate a maximum of 15 games, it goes on to say.
Right. I think what
Then
we
practice.
anticipate with some practice times, and, you know, softball is a spring sport, which means after the daylight savings time kicks in, you know, we typically have more hours of afternoon sunlight that we will not have lights. You know, our biggest issue and the drive among our constituents to have a lighted field for softball is that currently all the softball games have to be played in the early afternoon immediately after school is out, and a lot of the parents don't have the opportunity to get there just because they're being played between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock. And so our goal is to at least allow some games to be scheduled where the parents can attend. And but we did, I think, factor into that number,
21?
the 21 number, beyond the regularly scheduled games we might play in an evening, but also some practice times in the early part of the season, early part of the preseason in February when we're still getting dark earlier. But we would still be limiting the amount of hours into the evening that they would be used by the recommendations. You know, all activities would be done based on whatever recommendation the commission.
Well, I just
tells
know
us.
we talked about that in another application. I want to be even-handed.
Sure, sure.
Their
I still
number
don't
was higher than that for
even if you
their
take into
use,
account.
but You
even
have
if-
multi-fields, so.
We do. We have like I
Yeah.
said, fields, and in the
Right.
spring, you know, we could have baseball, softball, and soccer going on at the same time, but that'd be one night.
But not on that particular field.
Not on that field, but I'm
We're
just saying they could
talking
be
about this
going on
one.
at one night, but they were all under the same limitations to when they have to be completed and have to be out. So
Mm-hmm. Right.
we're living by that now.
The other thing is, they talked about the sound system, and you represent that it's really going to only be at the beginning of each
Yeah, I
regular
think-
game, not practice, correct?
No, there would be no
Do you
public
keep a
address.
decibel reader and measure?
I'm not sure
Because we
we've
do have a
ever-
noise ordinance that you
I've
have
never
to live
done
under.
that. You know, I have the benefit, I'm going on, I guess, in the fall will be my 18th year of doing public address on Friday night for football games. And so my boss tells me that he can hear me clearly in his neighborhood on Friday nights when we're playing, so he can keep up with what's happening. But I don't think we've ever actually read the decibel level,
Yeah.
but we are cognizant of the sound. We are cognizant of how late it goes, and we certainly with baseball, there's limitations on that, and we would have the same limitations with softball. They're not going to probably have as formal an announcing as football has. None of our other sports really use formal
Right.
public address, kind of like football does on Friday night.
But you would have to meet the noise ordinance.
We would. We
And
would.
so,
We would live
I
within
mean,
that.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
And I have a question, please. And this would only be for use by your school. You wouldn't be leasing out to other schools or entities to play night games or anything like that?
I believe that's the case. I mean, there could be the possibility of offering it for a youth tournament on a weekend, on a Saturday during the day. I think they've done that before, offered, you know, for younger players to come and play a series of games. But whatever those would be within our limitations and within the restrictions we're living by. And we would have school responsible supervision of the activity that would be responsible for making sure anything done met the limits of time
Number of games.
duration, number of games. Yeah, the number of games we use it would be a total for whatever purposes for the year.
Okay, thank you.
My question for your lighting
Yeah.
contractor is, with these LED lights, is there a way to put a baffle to try to divert the light down and block it all from crossing over the property line?
On these particular ones, no. With the LEDs, they're built in it. They, nothing you can add to this. Now, these fixtures are being donated by a third party, and I called the distributor today, and he said he thinks that you can get in-house built with it, some kind of, it's a backlight filter. He's going to try to see if this particular fixture can come with that. These numbers were run just with the standard light. One of the things that it was run with was, also we didn't run with any vegetative buffer, so those numbers will be a little high on that line because there's really no way to kind of model some light getting through and some not. So these are worst case scenario numbers.
And the placement of your 2 poles on the west side, I mean, that's the only option you have for placement of those 2 poles?
Pretty much, yeah.
Is there any hooding on the lights that make it just go down on the field, or does LED automatically set up like that?
Because the LEDs, they are actually aimed within the fixture itself. So there's nothing that you can modify like old style fixtures where you can move it and aim. These fixtures are meant to be set in a spot, and then the LEDs within that array are aimed from that way to get the most beneficial light out, yes.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could we have your name and address?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
It's Brad Glassy. I'm with Element 3 Engineering. It's 3938 Government Boulevard.
Any other questions by commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, similar to the St. Luke's application, there is a vegetative buffer that is going to, as he stated, reduce some of the bleed, if you will, onto that residential property adjacent. There's no way of determining exactly how much, but it will reduce some of it.
Could we require additional, adding to that vegetative buffer that's there today?
That's what we did on St. Luke's. Where it abuts residential, we did it on St. Luke's.
You could require some additional plantings.
We did.
One last question. Have y'all reached out to the neighborhood as far as having kind of?
Well, we have, I will say this, when we first, it's been several years ago, mapped out these changes to our entire facility, we had a community meeting before we even brought it to that planning commission, and have kept communications with the neighbors since that time over different elements, whether it was the baseball field, we did some additions to football, we changed softball, and we have knocked doors. I can't tell you that our administration has gone and knocked these doors this time, but we did mail, we did call, just so they would understand. They weren't, shocked by the fact that we had an application and that they had not heard about. I will just say that our relationship with the adjoining landowners has improved tremendously, really since this whole master plan was implemented, probably because of that first meeting. And at the time, then Councilperson Hudson, who lives in the adjoining neighborhood, led that effort to try to get that going, and that's really helped our neighborhood relations.
Richard, do we have the specifications for the plantings that we required for St. Luke's? Bert, you have those?
We did not bring the St. Luke's files with us, so we don't have that information.
Okay. Do you recall exactly what the specifications were?
I do not. I know that it went before the city council on Tuesday. I was not present at the meeting,
so. Their appeal, and it was 65 games maximum under lights. It was 6-foot buffer, vegetative height. They were talking about the height of the buffering where it abutted residential, and it was functioning under the noise ordinance for you know, meeting the decibel readings at certain hours, and they had 15 minutes after any game, because as a planning commission, we struggled with saying how long those lights could stay on. So we gave it a 15-minute window from the end of the game that lights had to be turned off.
And that was the metal halide lights. They could have lower lights
for getting people out.
Getting
We didn't
people
talk
out,
about
but
that.
the
stadium
actual
lights.
stadium lighting, field
Yes.
lighting.
Yes, and that was part of our recommendation.
Well, I
for
think
the
that's where we're
DOT.
headed with this application, we're putting the same requirements as we put on for St. Luke, so we just
They
need to
don't
know.
need as many games.
Yeah.
But our neighbors love us.
Mr. Olson, do you have conditions prepared?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, we do. We will get them to you. Do we have some?
I hope that they would somehow be similar, if not in exact duplication, but to treat each application,
Okay.
because we have a similar scenario of what is not meeting a normal code for commercial to residential. We don't have any code when it speaks to stadium lights.
Right. I think these are very similar to.
I would hope they were.
I have a question, again, for the applicant. You had mentioned several, different kinds of sports going on and different fields that are lighted. Do you anticipate any significant cumulative effect of all of the lights kind of going at the same time?
Are you making any driveway or parking changes?
No.
With this applicant? I didn't think so.
No, I mean, it obviously doesn't change the nature of what goes on significantly.
make sure.
Just changes some of the hours that things can go on, but that's it.
I guess y'all have read these.
I've just received those, and I think we will. Mr. Rich, I think every time we've come, there's always the mention of the driveways and the curb cuts and all that. That
Yeah,
sort
well,
of
I just wanted to
stays almost like it's a permanent piece of the recommendation.
Now, this one says 30 minutes after the game, but I think we landed on 15. I know we talked 30 or 15. I thought we landed on 30, but it came back as 15. So
We're good with 30, that's fine.
we did 15 on St. Luke's.
We're good with
Or you're
30,
good with
if that's the
15.
recommendation.
Change that.
Yeah, would 15 work? I'm sorry, did you say?
Well,
It's
I mean, I
close.
understand, I read that in the media reports of that situation and wondered, particularly when it comes, wouldn't be so worried about it with regard to a softball game and the number of relative people involved there. But, we played a semifinal football game on our campus last fall. There were probably 2,500 people in attendance, maybe 3,000. There wasn't an actual count. And a lot of those folks had traveled from Gordo, Alabama. I don't know how quickly we got them off their area on the other side of the football field. If we had turned the lights out on them in 15 minutes, we could have created some havoc
Well,
if that had
that
happened.
doesn't apply to that field. It's strictly to this field.
And that's fine. I
How
don't
many
think with
seats do
softball
you-
that would be,
How
the
many
number of
seats
people we
do
would
you
be
have?
moving.
How many seats in the stands? It's not 2,500.
No.
Yeah.
We're probably talking 150.
Right.
You also probably have additional lighting around.
We do. There's actually a lighting off the back of the football stadium that's used for sidewalk and safety that runs along the back. There's a playground adjacent to the softball facility and lights on the back of which are actually LED as well, on the back of the building there, just inside the lower left corner that light that's a basketball outdoor court there that is right adjacent to the softball field that's lit. Lights on the side of the gymnasium also light that area for safety. So it's not like it's total black dark if we turn the game lights off.
We do want to try to be consistent, I think.
We would operate with whatever restrictions there are.
Are there any other questions by commissioners? Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Is there anyone here to speak against?
I'm Kathy O'Keefe again. I just wanted to add one question. We think of lights, but we don't think of the sound sometimes that lights give off. Sometimes they don't reach the decibel level that create a problem with the ordinance, but they can have a buzz that is so annoying that you couldn't possibly sit in your yard. So I just wanted to ask the gentleman if he knows whether these lights are silent lights or if they give off a buzz of any kind.
They are silent.
We'll hold you to that.
Thank you. Are there anyone else here to speak against?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, my name is Kirk Shaw, and I live at 5309 Oak Bend Court. You may recognize me because I was here on the previous applicant's situation last month. I live about a mile as the crow flies from Mobile Christian, and I've heard Mr. Irwin's announcements and crowd noise. It does not bother me because we live far enough away that it's not a nuisance. I want to thank you for serving as commissioners. It's an important position. I know you're not paid, and sometimes you put in some pretty tough predicaments making decisions, and I thank you for that. But I came to speak today because I was pleased, number one, to hear Mr. Irwin say that they were going to use LED lights, which was an issue in our situation. And our situation involved spill light of 4, 5, 6 candle power in the neighboring area, whereas theirs is lower. But even with that difference, I want to make a point, and that is my reason for appearing is to encourage you to protect the reasonable expectations of homeowners when they purchase their houses by enforcing limitations on the amount of foot candles of light that are allowed at the property lines when schools or commercial establishments or industries set about to adopt a PUD or to amend their PUD to increase those foot candles. As you know, Mobile has experienced a decline in population in recent years. All cities want to retain their residents, including Mobile, and to attract new ones. One way you, as the Planning Commission, can help that effort is to require schools and businesses and industries to meet the standards, the reasonable standards on foot candles at the property line. This instance would require you to not allow the application because it does exceed that by a lesser amount than what was in our situation. I think the importance of this is demonstrated by 2 recent events. Number one, on Tuesday, the City Council approved a new fire chief, a man who'd been in the fire department for a long period of time. But one of the questions coming from the council was, will you move to Mobile? Now, I don't know the circumstances. I don't know if he lived in Mobile, moved out, or what. He was not from way outside the area. He worked in the fire department. But the point, he agreed to do so, and he got approved. This illustrates the need to improve our city so that people will want to live here, not be compelled to live here. Now, the second occurrence happened last week when we all received the notice from the Revenue Commission about what our property taxes were going to be. I don't know about you, but my property value, according to the Revenue Commissioner, declined considerably, 12.6%. The short-term benefit to me will be that I won't pay more taxes this year. The short-term harm to the county will be they won't receive the tax revenues from me. The long-term detriment to me will be that I will not be able to sell my house for what it was valued unless I stay with it long enough and hopefully conditions improve and my property value goes up. This shouldn't be. How do you help in this regard? You help by setting reasonable standards on foot candles and other things, and then enforce them. Don't allow, as we did last time, the applicant to just, well, okay, you meet whatever standard you set. There ought to be a standard that they're held to. It's happened in Madison, Mississippi. If you're familiar with that area, people there are anxious to move there. Residential property values have increased, and there is a population increase. We need to do that in Mobile. You can help in that regard by upholding no more than 0.2 foot candles requirement at the property line. And I thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions by commissioners?
I have a quick question for staff. In the zoning overhaul, do we anticipate maybe having a more specified standard for stadiums? Because right now, I know we're using some standards, but they're not expressly, applied or created for stadiums.
We are anticipating there being something, I can't say what. I believe I sent an email to the consultant already. If not, I will make sure I do so tomorrow.
Thanks.
Any other questions by commissioners? Anyone else here to speak against this application? Thank you. Item number 18, 1007 Spring Hill Avenue. It's recommended for holdover. Is the applicant present?
My name's Alex Nicholson. I'm at 11 Kirby Street. I am trying to buy this property and think I can address most of the issues that cause it to be recommended for a holdover. As far as the parking is concerned, there is a concern, wanting to know how many, the square footage in the front building be 1,400 square feet used for commercial purposes, which would require 4 parking spaces. The warehouse building in the back, where I would be running my business, I would have 2 employees. In the site plan I've submitted, with the 90-degree parking, it shows 6 spaces, including a handicap space. It also includes all of the notes on the site plan that were requested, and also includes the addition of the 6-foot privacy fence in the back. As far as the aisles around the parking, there's only 39 feet between the existing building and the fence, and there's no possible way to get a 24-foot aisle behind the parking spaces. I would love to if I could. And I am happy to make whatever changes y'all need, but the property is in a court administered estate, and any delay here for another month can cause significant delays down the line. So anyway, I appreciate y'all's consideration, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Richard, I mean, this looks like a lot of items to be addressed without being done in the proper way.
We would request that it be held over as recommended.
Yeah, we want to try to help speed things up for you. There's quite a few items. I don't think we're going to be able to.
Okay, I appreciate that. I thought I'd address most of them with the revised site plan, but I understand.
Yep, and this June the 15th, is that the quickest we could get to it for you? Okay.
Okay. There's no possibility of it at the 1 and 2 weeks? Or?
That would be June 1st, right?
I'm sorry?
Our next meeting is June 1st, but you feel like you need more time on this one.
Given everything that we have, yes, ma'am, we,
All right. Just for the applicant's sake, what's the mechanism for them to get approval for a non-standard parking?
a
Board of
variance,
Zoning
the Board of
Adjustment.
Adjustment, yes, sir.
Yeah. Staff may be able to speak to this, but the plan that the revised plan they presented appears to be more problematic to me than the 90-degree.
That was at the suggestion of the staff report mentioned that they thought with angled parking, you could have the 24-foot behind the parking spaces. I thought I had submitted two, one of which had 90-degree parking.
The 90 degree is up there.
Okay. Yeah. I had, can you get the right one? Yeah, I would prefer the 90-degree parking. I drew that at the suggestion of the staff report.
Well, I'm sure staff would be happy to
Yep.
help, at least give you some guidance on
Okay.
preferred ways, but I just wanted to mention that for reference, for your reference
Okay.
now. This seems more problematic to me than.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah. Any other questions?
Any other questions or comments?
Is the main thing holding up the sale, the approval by Planning Commission to allow furniture manufacturing in the B4?
Yeah, if I could get approval for that, I could go through with the sale.
So, I mean, our issue is mainly with the site, correct? Not the allowing furniture manufacturing.
But both applications are site plan specific, so it would be difficult for you to approve the use
How difficult?
without a site plan.
Could we approve it contingent upon an approved site plan at the next, in the meeting in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks rather?
I'm sorry?
Could we make the planning approval contingent upon the approval of a site plan, or would that make any difference in the sale?
I can't address whether that would make any difference in the sale or not.
That, if I had yes, if I had approval for the use contingent on working out the parking, that would help me. But I should also mention, with the sale is the lot next to Pine Street in the corner. That's a separate lot. The seller didn't want to give me permission to combine it in this PUD in case the sale fell through and they wanted to sell it separately. That is also included in the sale. It's not on this application for that reason, but at the moment, it's nothing but a parking lot. But I couldn't include that with this application because I couldn't get the seller's permission to do that.
Mr. Anderson and I are discussing what possibly can be.
I'm not sure. This has four handicap access aisle, but I thought I gave you another. Yeah, that's the one that has 6 spaces.
The problem is that the final approval is not really up to y'all, it's up to the Board of Adjustment, because y'all have the right to approve the site plan, but the site plan has to be approved for parking maneuvering by the Board of Adjustment. Now, I want to help him as best I can. It's still going to be subject to the Board of Adjustment's discretion, because either with this site plan that's up, he has to get a variance for maneuvering because it doesn't meet the requirements for backing out. The other site plan does not have enough parking spaces, and that has to be a variance.
But he,
And maneuvering too?
Yeah, because
Okay, yeah, because you have to back out into the street. So either site plan is going to have to go before the Board of Adjustment. Y'all can do it, y'all can approve it, but he's still going to have to go ahead to the Board of Adjustment.
but we don't have conditions prepared for today.
I have a question about that other lot. Did you say that the lot, that next big lot, is also eventually going to be part of this?
It's the same, I would be buying that as well.
And will you be using that for parking for these buildings? So
I
that these
could.
problems would
I
not?
could if I needed to, but I couldn't include it with this application.
Because you don't own that?
Right. I can't own it till I can, can't put it in the application till I own it, and can't own it till I, yeah, right, that's
If
what I
if you
thought.
had it, we wouldn't have a problem with the parking,
Okay.
right?
No, absolutely not, no. But I need to mostly know about the use as far as furniture if that would,
So you have both properties under option with two different owners?
it's the same owner, they're two different lots.
And he wouldn't allow the corner lot to be included in this application?
I'm sorry?
He wouldn't allow the corner lot to be included in this application, although it would solve your,
No, because he didn't want it all put in the same PUD, that then if, for whatever reason, the sale fell through, he would be stuck with both lots in the same thing. So that was his understanding.
Mr. Anderson, this may help. A conceptual approval of this application, knowing that it will be coming back for a final approval, either with a variance for parking or inclusion of the adjacent property. So you'll get
Yeah.
something you can,
That's what I need, yeah. Okay,
Good to go.
okay, I appreciate that.
I've never voted on a conceptual approval before.
So, we don't need any recommendations or anything for that, we can just provide.
no,
conceptual
because
approval.
basically it's contingent upon it coming back. It doesn't really allow him to begin any work or anything. It just lets you get to that step. And the commission has done conceptual approval on PUDs frequently.
But then he needs to go to the Board of Adjustment.
Yep.
Or
And,
include,
but is he able to articulate to the Board of Adjustment that we've, as a planning commission, approved his preliminary plan?
yes, but.
Conceptually?
Conceptually, yes, but he also has the option of inclusion of the corner property, which will fix the parking problem.
But he says that's resisted by the next owner.
No, if, I would own that lot as well, that's included in the purchase, but they wouldn't,
His next door neighbor was not going to allow it to be included without this approval.
But do you think that he needs the Board of Adjustment first to even see whether they would approve a contingency based on a hardship? Because that's their benchmark, and then come back to us, so then we can have an idea of what, and not be conceptual, but more knowing exactly what is planned?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you buy this, you are buying the other property.
Yes.
So when you come back for the final PUD, it will be inclusive, or can be inclusive of that other property
Right.
and fix your parking
correct.
issue.
Yeah.
And not require.
And not require a
would need a
variance at that point.
Conceptual approval with him coming back with the site plan for approval, whether it's through the Board of Adjustment or including the corner lot.
Okay, and if he doesn't get that corner lot hypothetically, and we approve today, he goes to the Board of Adjustment and says this site plan, which doesn't include the corner lot, and then he could get building permits and proceed
If-
from there,
Well, it would still have to
without
come.
having to come back to.
No, it would
this-
still have to come back to you. Would just strictly be conceptual, contingent. The board would have to approve it.
And I'm not making any changes currently, and it's existed this way for 30-something years, but if I had approval that I knew I could run my business there, I'd be happy to use the other lot for parking to fix whatever problems I could, so.
Okay, well, we'll each get a
Is
vote.
conceptual approval something that requires a motion and a vote?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to this? Praise God.
We'll hang Richard up fast.
Just hold it up.
That closes the, that closes the public part of this. We now go into deliberation. Item number 1, 3450 Gerby Road was recommended for holdover until the June 1st meeting. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 2 was withdrawn. Item number 3, Providence Park Mobile 1 subdivision. It's in 2 parts, a PUD subdivision. Both are recommended for approval, subject to staff recommendation. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Both parts pass. Item number 4, an extension, south side of Howes Ferry Road. It's recommended for a 1-year extension. Is
So
there-
moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. New subdivision application, 7225 Old Pascagoula Road. Recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve amending number 4 to allow 2 curb cuts, 1 in and 1 out.
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. Item number 6, Smith Latham recuses. 9885 Name and Loop, recommended for tentative approval, subject to staff recommendations. Is there a motion?
We had a question about item number 1 and 2. Applicant was requesting 50 feet as opposed to 30 feet. Can we hear staff's opinion on that again, please?
I believe he was requesting that no dedication be required along Juanita Street only.
Okay. So he was wanting 1 and 2 removed.
Sorry, I had only noted number 1 being removed.
Okay, number 1, I'm sorry.
Is there a motion?
But this is a county, so they require that. Is that what we understood?
Even the subdivision regulations require 60 feet for non-curb and gutter improvements.
It's accommodating the ditches.
Correct.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. Item number 6, 93 Talking Leaves Lane. It's recommended for denial, but conditions were given. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. 12388 Airport Boulevard, Airman Estates, recommended for approval, subject to staff recommendations. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. 250 Chatham Street, recommended for approval. Staff recommendations. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve amending the setback to coordinate with historic mobile overlay, historic district overlay.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded with the changed condition. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. Item number 10, 5200 Schillinger Road, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
I move we approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. Item number 11, the Legacy at Saybrook subdivision is recommended for approval. It's subject to staff recommendations. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendation.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. Item number 12, west side of Dolphins Island Parkway. This application is recommended for holdover to the June 1st meeting. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Properly passed. Item number,
Item number 13, Mr. Gant is recused.
Ms. Latham, if I may,
Yes.
we did pull the site plan that was submitted. What was on the screen and in your packet is a copy of the survey, not the site plan. The site plan does reflect a connection to Nob Hill. So just to let y'all know that we misspoke, or I misspoke when I said that that plan did not show it, which actually the plan didn't show it, but the site plan did.
Let me ask a couple of questions regarding, I mean, we recently had this property before us where there was requests for access for the neighborhood to walk, to vote. Was that a PUD that was before us then, or is that?
Yes, sir, it was strictly for the church site because they were subdividing off the house, and so they were changing the site. In the driveway to Birchwood was discussed at that time, and it was, as neighbors stated, was used. So now the school is requesting permission to use some of the church parking until September, when they will have their parking installed to allow them to operate a day camp during the summer.
So this access on Nob Hill, that's going to be a temporary access.
The way the school is planning on, or hopes to use it permanently once all of the improvements are in place.
But just because the applicant made that request on their site plan, and that's what was reviewed, this commission, by listening to or reading a letter from the neighborhood association about the concerns for cut-through, and the council representative who also came down to address us, we could deny that access. Correct. And I'd like to represent that be a condition, that it's denied that access. It's not open now, and the concern is that it would create a tremendous cut-through. So,
As I think Mr. Williams or Rick mentioned during the application, the original staff proposal for the prior PUD was to deny access. It was changed when it was when it was held over for the next meeting. The neighbors were unaware that it had been changed. So, I mean, you and I are very aware of all the havoc that caused afterwards, and there were threats of lawsuits. They just missed their appeal time, so the neighbors were very much against opening that. They were just unaware that the condition had been changed when it came up for a vote later.
I think it should be very specific that we deny access, especially if it was part of their application to want it open. Yes, I'll make that as a motion on this application.
Second.
that everything, all the other conditions, I don't think they pose any problems.
Motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
New group applications. 363 South Royal and 378 Old Water Street. PUD and subdivision, both are recommended for approval. We'll take it as one. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendation, the PUD and the sub.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass.
Number 15, Mr. Gant is recused. It is an application for a subdivision and a planned unit development.
That's the one with the alley.
I'll make the motion to approve, subject to staff recommendation, eliminating notes 1, 2, 4, and allowing one curb cut on Lot A along Persimmon and one curb cut on the adjacent parcel on Persimmon.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Item number 16, 1109 Government Street and 1108 and 1110 Church Street. It's two-part subdivision and PUD. Both are recommended for approval. Take it as one item. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendation.
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. Item number 17, 5900 Cottage Hill Road. Looking for a motion.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
I think we're just going
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Well, we might want to let anybody in the audience know what those recommendations were, since it just got handed to us as well.
I guess I would also ask if we were considering amending the 30-minute after game completion, or if that was,
Oh, that's right. We
I
got.
think that was our recommendation for St. Louis was 30 minutes.
I thought it was too, but it came back as 15 minutes for somehow, because we debated that back and forth.
The discussion was back and forth between 15 and 30. The final was 15.
Okay. But I like our conditions for Louisville Christian to be the same as St. Luke, so I'll
Withdraw your motion.
I withdraw my motion and then make a new motion to approve based on staff recommendations, changing item 1 to 15 minutes.
Second.
Is there a consideration to, I know they didn't ask for it, so, but is there a consideration that their usage maybe be limited to 30 versus 21?
I think we worked with the other applicant on the number of games, and this is the same type of approach, keeping it the same. And so we said 21 games is
I think our last applicant,
basically what the applicant
there
had
were 60
requested.
games at St.
It was
Luke.
65 we gave for Days Under Lights, but there, it's a multi-used field. It's totally different. This has lighting on other fields, so the 21, I think, is correct. And working with the applicant and also being sensitive to the neighbors that abut this parcel. So I'm very comfortable going with this one on this particular single softball use field.
I only ask in case there was a rare occasion that there might be a Little League tournament that went a little later, they did something.
I think they factored into things.
Okay,
I
well,
think they factored.
but I can ask the question, thank you.
Well, I have a question about that too, because it says 21 evenings, and I know they also refer to before daylight savings time, having some practices that would require the lights. So is 21 going to be evenings, going to accommodate both the games and the very limited but necessary practice time before daylight savings time.
My recollection of what the applicant stated was that the 21 was factoring in the number of games, the anticipated number of practices that would occur with lights after dark so parents could attend and watch practices, and an occasional after season or other type of league play, that they took all of that into consideration when coming up with the number 21. As Ms. Rich stated on the St. Luke's, that 60 number or 65 number was based on varsity football and potential playoffs, junior varsity football, because they're planning on bringing that in, and playoffs, as well as soccer. So it required more nighttime games.
Right.
Okay.
There's other fields up there, 2 other fields that are lit that are not under any standards, because we didn't even have that in the past. But we've created a standard as how many days possible in a calendar year. So,
But this is just the number of games, though. There will be additional nights of practice use.
It's,
they counted.
it is number of nights that the field lights will be used.
But if you look at the narrative, it says games, 21 games.
21 games, and it says
15 games will definitely need lights. It may be up to 21, and then it goes on to talk about the daylight savings times and the evening practices.
Yeah, and it states that the lights will only be used until daylight savings time begins for those practice nights.
I mean,
Is
if
that-
the applicant's okay with 21, then that's fine, but
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure that,
I understood it. I thought I understood the understanding of how many times they would need lights on that field at any.
I only proposed the question because once we got them, the odds of them being able to come ask again is gonna be tough. So, but if they're okay with that and that's what the commission wants, then so be it. But we are at liberty during deliberation to bring up the question.
Well, this body can decide how many nights they would like, just trying to keep a standard in equal treatment. And I know that's different use, and so if this body wants to say no more than 30 nights, so that there is no reason to come back, if there's any concern that this body has, that it wasn't articulated how many nights it would be under lights, but got to come up with a number.
My impression is the applicant is agreeable to 21 nights. I mean, that's less than we gave to St. Luke's, but the applicant's agreeable to it, so.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But if you want to give more, it's your problem.
Mr. Gant, may I ask the applicant if in fact he is agreeable to 21, if they're agreeable? 21 nights work for y'all?
Do we have to limit it? Do we have to put a limitation on the number?
Yeah.
We should, we did on the other.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the dilemma.
Make it short.
We would accept the additional nights just so that there's never a question, but we would think living within 30 days of a year for softball would be ample to never have to come back and address the issue again. But that's, again, we're leaving that, as we were told, in the hands of the commission to tell us what we're going to do. We were trying to calculate, based on playing nights, what we could live with, but 30 would be within a tolerance that we could not foresee ever having to ask for an amendment, if you're willing to do that. And I think we're still below the total number of nights on our campus that you offered the other applicant, if that's the big concern. If you took all sports involved in total, we'd still be less nights than they asked for.
Thank you.
I would like to offer an amendment to Mr. Embry's motion and change the dates from 21 to 30.
Well, I mean, 21, 25, or 30, I mean, I don't think it's a big difference. I just want to make sure that the applicant, I thought they were happy with 21, so.
They were originally, but I think we just make it 30 would prevent him from having to come back. If any changes in the future, rural schedules, from 18 games to 25 games, whatever.
Okay.
State tournament, if you have to use it at night, so.
Okay.
It's reasonable to go up somewhere between 21 and 30, give them some
Okay, well, I'll remove my, withdraw my previous motion, and then resubmit a motion for approval based on staff recommendations, changing the 21 days to 30 days, and again, the 30 minutes to 15 minutes after the game.
Second.
It's properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposes?
Opposed?
Item passes.
And then all the other conditions are very similar to the last application that was a sports facility, and that is complying with the noise ordinance and also the 6-foot-high, 10-foot-wide evergreen screening where it abuts, the east property line, which is the residential. So everything else is the same. Thank you.
Item number 18, 1007 Spring Hill Avenue. Is there a motion?
Move to conditionally approve contingent upon the application coming back to the planning commission with either a variance granted to the Board of Adjustment or an inclusion of the adjacent parcel.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes?
Opposed.
Noted. Passed. Thank you. That closes deliberation. I'd like to ask for a 5-minute break prior to public hearing. Adjourn for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I need to clean up my desk.
Sorry I didn't call you back. I was at a deposition and I knew you were going to be busy, so I missed you this morning.
All right, Nick.
I think you got to just try to see what kind of look back at what Bill's going to be like we did when we were out there to do this. It's not going to fit that tree. Yeah, which is good. Yeah. I'm sorry. Volunteered to do this, and I saw her 2 or 3 days later and she said, it was 7. Yeah, I missed the meeting with the church. Remember that? You know, all y'all did. Because, but I had a guy that had a, I think it was a student housing thing in Best Riches, so it was not a sure thing. Is anything a sure thing? Well, I mean, that would have, well, we were here until the very end.
gonna be 5 minutes, right? Yeah. Run upstairs.
The only thing is just sort of an observation somebody made one time. It would be nice to have somebody from the school studying on it, so they can see what our that was the thing. Make somebody from the utilities, you got to Vulcan, you got to they got somebody from the local public school. It's not the principal, you know, but it's the liaison.
Yes.
I'm concerned also that sometimes we get people, especially
So that one I was, just because I was a property.
Sit down and shut up.
So it's very hard to pull information out. But there are lots of times when you feel like it's all
I was telling,
and they need some help.
telling Jennifer what I wanted to say is the issue is with that one.
I read this one though 6 months ago.
I mean, the original master plan, if you think about lighting, you're gonna do the existing, so I would have thought, you ever wanna light this, then you better move it away from the property line.
It looks to me like we can come up with some kind of high power inside.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to shield that, I think. I mean, you did, you know, and that's the other thing, we're constrained by the donated light. Right. But, you know, you've got a pool, you know, you've got your light here, I mean, they could design, you know, a back shield on the back side.
Our 5 minutes is up.
There's ways to do it.
You know, I'm a timekeeper, Carlos. So everyone will please take their seats.
could we please start taking our seats?
Well, I'm open. Yeah, oh yeah. Right. Well, I understand a lot of times, like if it's .3 the property line and the house, you know, nobody's sleeping on the road. I voted against kids.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I get your point, but I didn't realize you were going that way. I was
No,
like,
well, I was going to say something, but everybody was exhausted.
whoa. Yeah.
Right. Ultimately, I wanted them to have their lights. I felt like it needed to be on the record.
We'll call into order for the public hearing to consider amendment to 64.4J telecommunications towers and facilities pursuant to federal regulations.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I apologize. That was placed on the agenda prematurely. In my conversation with legal, I misunderstood. I thought it was ready. It will be ready for the call at your next meeting.
Okay. We will not be talking about that one. This will be the public hearing to consider adoption of the future land use plan and map and the major street plan and map. Ms. Biko?
Okay. For the record, I'm Shayla Biko. I'm the Executive Director of Build Mobile. Build Mobile represents a new department where we have realigned and brought together our planning, permitting, and historic development functions under one umbrella. So I'm very excited and feel very privileged to lead this group. I thank you for the opportunity to address you today before we move into hearing comments with respect to the future land use and major street plans. But before I begin, I'd like to just highlight or introduce to you some of the team members that have worked tirelessly over the last year and a half, focus on the implementation of Map for Mobile. As I've said before, the sheer magnitude of this work truly requires a cross-functional team approach, so I'd like to recognize this group and acknowledge their efforts. So of course, you know Richard Olson, our Deputy Director of Planning and Zoning, Bert Hoffman, Principal Planner, Brian Underwood, our Deputy Director of Long Range, Matt Jollett at the end is our Urban Designer. I don't think he's here, but Cart Blackwell is our Assistant Director of Historic Preservation. And also on our team, we have Carrie Kamanis and Flo Kessler, who are attorneys with the city's legal department. Marion McElroy, I think she's sitting over there. She's our Senior Director of Build Mobile, and she specifically helps to oversee our permitting and inspections divisions. And then finally, Keena Andrews, a senior planner, and she's also, of course, your fellow Planning Commission member. But I'd like to recognize the hundreds of citizens and stakeholders that have participated in this process thus far. Their active participation and feedback since the very beginning has been phenomenal, and it's certainly been very beneficial to this process now and as we continue to move forward. So if you recall, at the April 6th Planning Commission meeting, you heard from the city's consultant team, White and Smith, where you were given a very comprehensive overview of the city's efforts to update the general land use and major street plans. Well, today we'd like to spend time highlighting some very specific recommendations that we would like for the commission to consider when adopting the future land use and major street plans. These recommendations were drafted since White and Smith's initial report to the Planning Commission back in April, so we used this time to formally present you with a series of recommendations. Referred to as Phase 2 of the Map for Mobile implementation, this process now moves the city into the implementation phase of the planning process. This phase focuses on the adoption of the future land use and major street plans, as they will now provide a land use planning blueprint which integrates with the current Map for Mobile framework, which was adopted by the Commission in 2015. With your approval of both plans, this document will provide a streamlined, concise statement of the city's land development policies. Let me please emphasize that the future land use plan does not in any way replace the zoning ordinance. We have a lot of work still left to do. With respect to that timeline, the city's consultant group will present a draft of the recommended zoning structure before the end of the year. However, the new zoning ordinance will not be completed for another year. This ordinance will be presented in modules to solicit community feedback. Its adoption will not be piecemeal, but when we've entered into the completion of that document, we will we're confident that we will have a sound ordinance that once it's completed will be representative of Mobile in all of its community and economic development interests. So again, we will introduce it to you in phases. We will not ask for you to consider it or adopt it. As we are introducing it to you in modules, we will be vetting it all over the city, receiving feedback from the various stakeholder groups that we've been working with thus far. At the very end, we will ask for you to adopt it, but it's our intention to introduce it to you in a very iterative process so that you will feel very comfortable and confident with all that it entails, and you will feel that we have done our jobs in terms of vetting it with the community. The future land use plan will be the underlying basis of the future zoning ordinance. As such, the creation and adoption of the plan is the first step in rewriting the zoning ordinance. Without the future land use plan, which will be the formal basis of the zoning ordinance, future decisions may be considered arbitrary and capricious. The comprehensive planning process ensures that the resulting ordinance is not created to benefit special interests, but rather benefits the general public as a whole, and therefore is not arbitrary or unconstitutional. Put another way, a zoning ordinance that does not evolve from a comprehensive plan and relying on the comprehensive process may be subject to challenge. A few reminders regarding the process. This implementation phase did not revisit Map for Mobile, but built on and confirmed the plan's long-range vision. The team thoroughly reviewed a wide range of precedent plans, both in draft and adopted forms, that informed many of the recommendations outlined in the draft report. The city's consultant team, as well as city staff, relied upon several sets of data analyses, data trends, building permits, environmental reports, residential sales, and tax delinquent properties to establish priorities for the updated plan. The consultant team also facilitated public listening sessions with a variety of stakeholders, including our staff, the council, the mayor's executive team, and of course the commission, to explore ideas about growth, community structure, and citywide opportunities for reinvestment and revitalization. Beginning with the process kickoff in June of last year, we have met with over a dozen stakeholder groups and held countless meetings with members of the real estate and business community, neighborhood groups, the university, representatives from the Mobile County Public Schools, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and area utilities, just to name a few. Our outreach efforts for this phase of the process concluded on April 6th, where we unveiled the future land use and major street plans at a very well-attended public meeting held at Government Street Baptist Church. Based on comments received since your initial call for public hearing, we are now proposing a series of recommendations that correspond with the feedback that we've heard over the last several weeks. Again, let me reemphasize that the recommendations identified in the future land use plan relate to the city's land use policies. While the FLIM categories are focused on patterns of land use in general character, it does not stipulate prescriptive development parameters such as lot sizes, allowable densities, setbacks, buffers, frontage types, building heights, lot coverage, site configuration, and parking requirements. Lastly, while the plan highlights the city's natural and environmental assets, its purpose is not intended to include a comprehensive inventory of current or proposed city amenities, recreational assets, or community facilities. Forthcoming plans currently prioritized in the framework will cover many of the items that I've mentioned. Examples of such forthcoming plans will include a Parks and Recreation Master Plan. These things are already in motion. We are working toward a citywide housing study. And then lastly, we have several sub-area plans for specific geographies throughout the city that are currently underway. Again, the FLUME and the major street plans, they're living documents. And so it is our goal and our intent to come back to you on a very regular basis to update the future land use plan as existing conditions will frequently change. And it is our goal to ensure that our plan is reflective of those changes. With that, I'd like to walk you through a series of recommendations that we will now formally present to the commission for consideration. The very first recommendation involves a new category that we've defined as water-dependent uses. This designation applies to areas within the Mobile-Tensas River Delta, Mobile Bay, Dog River, and associated tributaries where potential future uses must, under normal operating conditions, be located on or in or immediately adjacent to coastal waters in order to be physically and economically practicable. This land use category may also apply to water-related and water-enhanced uses such as marinas, complementary marine businesses, and other facilities that are open to the public and offer public access to the waters of the state. The next land use recommendation, downtown waterfront, applies to an area generally bound by Virginia Street to the south, I-10 to the west, Water Street to the north, and the Mobile River to the east. The primary intent of this designation is to promote opportunities for expanding public waterfront access and the possibility of additional public-oriented activities to make the waterfront more inviting and safe. Land use in areas designated downtown waterfront include existing industrial and heavy commercial facilities, but may also include complementary businesses and public facilities, as well as open spaces and access points to enhance the enjoyment and appreciation of the natural shoreline environment. The last recommendation that I'd like to share, it's not illustrated on this slide, but under the priority investment opportunity area for the Dauphin Island Parkway corridor, the draft report shows the corridor boundaries extending for the Dauphin Island Parkway area between Yorkshire Road to Gill Road. And so we're proposing that that corridor be redefined to cover Levine Road south to Cedar Park Drive. So that's just a slight change in a corridor definition under the priority investment opportunity area. In addition to the future land use map, today we'll also ask for your approval of the Major Street Plan. The Major Street Plan represents the city's vision for a coordinated land use and transportation strategy. The Major Street Plan recognizes key existing and future street corridors within the city's overall transportation network based primarily on analysis of traffic volumes and character of traffic movement that could be generated by future development of land according to the future land use plan. Right-of-way requirements are currently being reviewed to ensure that new standards are more realistic as opposed to what was established in the 1960s when the plan was first drafted. Today, we would ask that you move forward with the adoption of the Major Street Plan as well as the functional classification summary. Once the engineering and traffic engineering departments have completed their recommendations, we will then come back before the commission with an amendment that includes the corresponding right-of-way width tables for the associated corridors identified in the Major Street Plan. By resolution, we are recommending the adoption of the zoning correlation matrix as it corresponds to the future land use plan. Shortly after the adoption of the Map for Mobile framework, the commission requested that staff develop a mechanism to more appropriately apply the standards outlined in the Map for Mobile framework document. The zoning district correspondence matrix gives the Planning Commission clear guidance for reviewing development proposals for consistency with the future land use plan. Each future land use designation on the flume will have at least one corresponding zoning district, allowing a more precise application of the future land use plan. This matrix offers a temporary translation tool to help staff and the commission during what we defined as the gap period. And the gap period is the time between the adoption of this plan and when we actually have the zoning ordinance adopted. So we've got that 12-month gap, so this is simply meant to be a tool to help you as zoning requests are made to the commission. It has a sunset date. So when the zoning ordinance is actually adopted, this tool will go away. Please note that the staff has recommended the addition of the water-dependent use in downtown waterfront as land use classifications and has separated the neighborhood, suburban, and traditional use categories into distinct classifications, all to be covered by the matrix. Lastly, historic business as a current zoning district has been added as it was inadvertently omitted from the chart. That wraps up the series of recommendations that we, staff has made since the initial report by White and Smith was presented to you. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time or at the end when the presentation or the public hearing concludes.
Quick question, were the changes that were inadvertently left off, are they on this sheet here?
Yes, they're all reflected in the new matrix that's in front of you, but it is a recommendation to you, and so you would have to, if you so choose, move to vote on that tool as a recommendation from staff.
Thank you. Are there any questions now by commissioners? All right, thank you, Ms. Biko.
Mr. Chairman, I will call the names of the people who have signed in to speak in the order in which they signed in. Kathy O'Keefe.
Again, for the record, I'm Kathy O'Keefe. I live in District 6. I used to live in Midtown, but I lost my home in the floods of 1980, twice, 81 and 82. I was in my home in the middle of the night in water up to my shoulders with 4-year-old twins and an infant. I learned the hard way what happens when planning doesn't happen. When Arthur Outlaw was finishing his term of office, he did a radio interview, and he said, the interviewer asked him, "Do you have any regrets, Mr. Outlaw?" And he said, "I have one regret. My regret is that the city of Mobile was developed to benefit powerful interests, moneyed people, people who would benefit from the commercial corridors created, and not for the citizens of Mobile." I almost wrecked my car on Dolphin Street Extension hearing that admission, because it's exactly what I had experienced coming down here to this planning meeting for years in the 80s after I lost my home. We were forced to come together and unite as foot soldiers in a battle. I joined Mobile United, I joined MACAC, I went to FEMA in Washington with the 3 city commissioners, where we were told that the city of Mobile was absolutely pathetic considering its rainfall each year and having no stormwater management ordinances, runoff plans, etc. At the time, Rick Stout was our city attorney. He deposed my husband and I when we were in a class action lawsuit about the floods. And he made it very clear, as did Gary Greeno and the other commissioners, that the philosophy here is you get to develop your land to its fullest dollar value, regardless of the effect that that has on others. An individualized philosophy of development. And that individualized philosophy of development kept this town for decades from coming together as a community to decide what we want our city to look like. I joined Envision Mobile when that organization started, and for 6 years labored constantly in it. I was the Environmental Compass Director for that. My background professionally is in Parks and Recreation. I taught at the University of South Alabama for a period of 37 years. We never had plans. As much as I begged, I had to teach the former city director of recreation what the ADA was. I had to, with my students, threaten to go to Municipal Park and dig out paths for the disabled so they could go from the pavilion to the restroom. When I go into my national professional meetings and I saw cities the size of Mobile get national awards for what they were doing in land use, I used to come home and just say, what are we not doing? What am I missing? How do we motivate people? Then my own 5 children reached adulthood and said, we're out of here. We're not staying in Mobile. In fact, it was very difficult at times to even address to my children what I was doing here. One day, I was in this chamber and I was trying to get the city to put the West Regional Library not inside the park in West Mobile, which was already overstressed, but in another location which had clearly been identified by a strategic planning committee. And Mr. Waller yelled at me across the chambers, "You people from north of the Mason-Dixon line think you can come down here and tell us what to do." I said, "Mr. Waller, I've been in Mobile for 35 years at that point. When does a person get to have an opinion?" And that's going to keep people from moving here, and it's going to keep young people from staying if they feel their voice isn't welcomed. It's very important, we have 1 minute, thank you, Bert, that you look at this map and you embrace a new philosophy. And the philosophy is this is a community of subjects, not a group of individuals. And we must get on the ball and embrace forward-thinking, progressive ideas and give our planning department the support they need to carry those out, or else we're going to have judges doing it, overriding planning staff recommendations. We're going to have insiders, lobbyists continue to work for what's good for them and not what's good for us. I'm here because us are getting mobilized, and we want to take the city forward with you, but we've got to have your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Keefe.
Casey Pipes.
Good afternoon. I'm Casey Pipes, 2255 Ashland Place. I'm an attorney here at Helmsing Leach in Mobile. And my client today, I've been asked to represent the Mobile Area Association of Realtors. The Realtors are the group of individuals and professionals who are kind of on the front edge, the leading edge of the commercial development that goes on in the city, the businesses looking to move to the city, the people looking to move to the city. And the realtors have concerns over the current maps and plans that are proposed for adoption today. And it's not a specific issue about a specific plan of this line needs to be moved west an inch or this color needs to be shaded more gold instead of yellow. The issue is that the plan is premature at this time. What you have is a future land use map and a future land use plan that presumes there's going to be a future zoning code to catch up to it. It presumes there's going to be this zoning code rewrite. We all know it's coming. We just heard that we're calling this the gap period that we might fall into between adopting the plan and actually having the zoning code catch up. The fact that you need a matrix to figure out how to translate your current zoning to what the plan shows kind of proves the point that we don't have the tools to even know what this plan means. I looked at it just from a academic exercise. I live in Ashland Place. It's kind of the gold colored yellow on the map, mixed density residential. To hear what the plan calls for mixed density residential, it's single family residential, it's duplex, it's quadplex, it's low rise apartments, it's mid rise apartments, it's neighborhood retail, it's offices, it's everything. How do I know, looking at this map, what that means? What's the future land use plan for Ashland Place? I don't know. I can't figure it out. I doubt y'all can figure it out from what the map is and what the plan is and what everything else is that you have to work with. And that's just an anecdotal example. The same thing's true for Bel Air Mall, same thing's true for the vacant land on Dolphin and Sage, same thing's true for this property, my building across the street. I don't know what the plan is. And I don't know why you need to have the plan in place today and create a gap period with the idea that you're going to amend the plan, 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 when you can just wait. We know the zoning code's coming. We know what it's, eventually there'll be a zoning code to review. There'll be a module to review. This could be another one of those modules. We talk about it, and I love getting it and seeing it, and we can make tweaks to it, you know, as a concept. But once you adopt it, all of a sudden it's going to start to be something that comes back around, just like Map-O-Mobile was. It wasn't a code, but it was something, and it meant something to certain projects along the way, and maybe what you might call the gap period there. We feel that this can jeopardize development in the city, and that's what the harm is of acting now without having the details to know what this map even means to a particular area, not just a particular piece of property. I realize we're not looking at that when you're looking at citywide zoning, but to a whole area or to a whole swath of land, I don't know what it means, you know, based off the description that's been provided, the maps that have been available. I realize the matrix, I guess, has now been amended from what was made available to us previously to add some districts or change some districts, but I don't think that was where the problem was. The whole problem is we need a matrix to understand these things. The major street map has similar kind of issues. And I realize it's designed to tell you how much land do we need to ask this developer to give us when he's doing something because he fronts on this street. Do we need more land? Do we need less land? What do we need? The problem is we don't know what the engineering standards are yet. We don't know what the new subdivision regulations are going to be yet. We know they're coming. We know they're working on them. Why can't we just wait and do the major street plan in the major street map when we have those details, when we know what it looks like? We've seen the drawings and map for Mobile, and I know that this kind of just referred back to the map for Mobile drawings, but surely the technical details are coming. We know they're coming. We can hold off on adopting the map until we have the details. Then at least we'll all be able to know, you'll be able to know what the impact is of approving these plans because you'll have the details to analyze it and to understand it. I think to adopt it now on the theory that we don't know what it means now, but we'll catch up later and maybe we can amend it later is a risk, because whatever gets adopted is going to get used for you or against you or for somebody or against somebody during this gap period. And once you get something adopted, it's much harder to get it amended or changed along the way or once the details flesh out than it is to wait and adopt it later. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Debbie Foster.
Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Foster. I reside at 4507 Park Road, 36605. Mr. Chairman, I'm here representing two different organizations and hoping that you will allow me a little indulgence in my time frame because of that. I am here on behalf of the Dog River Clearwater Revival and the Peninsula of Mobile. I'm executive director of both organizations. You have, I hope, before you in your packet several pages of comments that we make. You know, first of all, we want to applaud Shayla Biko and her team for this incredible undertaking. This has been, I know, daunting at best. I am one of those people from the Outlaw administration that looked for this to start about 30 years ago and have been waiting ever since. So I'm very, very grateful to see this now happening. Under our Peninsula comments, if you will look, please, we do support the Peninsula's designation right now as a low-density residential area. We do encourage you as this process moves forward toward the zoning to really have strict adherence into that. That area is primarily residential with a lot of irregular uses right now, so we really are encouraging you to adhere to that strictly as this lays out. The mixed commercial use corridor for us, again, we do support that and again ask you for strict adherence. For that community that has undergone over 40 years of a steady decline, there are a number of mixed uses that are there that are not desirable, to say the least. So your aim in this plan to raise the design quality and improve the connectivity and all of that is admirable. We would like to see your laws back that up to get us to where we want to be. We applaud the downtown waterfront access. We have long awaited that in Mobile. However, we have had in the Peninsula of Mobile Corridor Master Plan was unveiled almost a year ago. We are wanting it adopted by your body, please, and to have in that included in this process the Perch Creek Nature Trail and Preserve and all of those areas of the expansion of Helen Wood Park and the bike trails and those things that are in our master plan that you all have, we would like that included in these maps, please. Same thing with the parks and open spaces. We were thrilled to see what is up there right now, but we were very disappointed to see that the full Crepe Myrtle Trail, including the Dog River Loop, was not included in the map, nor the expansion of the Helen Wood Park. We would like to see that map before it is adopted, including those things. In your water-dependent use, hats off. Thank you so much for realizing Mobile has water. We have needed that designation. We need conditional uses designated for these uses. We have many marinas. You guys just heard one, I think at one of your last meetings a month ago, where we have marinas operating right in the middle of neighborhoods. We need some immediate relief on some of this, so we do ask you to go ahead and move forward with those designations. We request inclusion in the flume of the many existing marinas that now are along the western shoreline of the peninsula, as well as in the Dog River area. We would like those in there now so that as those people try to upzone or do whatever they do, this would already be established. Under the other map attributes, you have wetland designations. Again, thank you so much for realizing we have wetlands. We would, however, like to have, again, the Perch Creek area be reflected in this map. We've just gotten word that we are going to be included in the Alabama Birding Trail and would like to have all of that, of course, collectively reflected on this map. Thank you for your going ahead and addressing our number 5 about the changing of the Miracle Mile boundaries. Thank you for fixing that, so I'll skip. The major street plan, again, we would like to see the road diet that is before ALDOT right now, that's been in discussion for years, for 2 years now, be reflected in this. That is a road diet for Dauphin Island Parkway south of Staples Road. It allows for the bike trails. The environmental conditions, the bicycle routes, again, we're back to having the inclusion of the things that are in our plan included in here. Specifically, the inclusion of the Dog River Loop, of the Crepe Myrtle Trail, the proposed bikeways. We would like also, we noticed on the map, on the major street map, I think it was, that it moves forward all the way north on DIP, all the way to the loop. That's the first time we've seen that. We would like to be included in that discussion. We're not against it, but we would like to be a part of that. Your capital improvement projects, we don't see that on the Helen Wood Park nor McNally Park improvements reflected. In conclusion, again, as we await, now that we've told we've got about a year again to wait before we get zoning, we would like to get assistance in getting our plan adopted by your body so that we can kind of go ahead and have all this set forward and don't have to keep coming. As far as Dog River is concerned, if you see the heavy industry, we are a little concerned. We don't understand what we see in that. Is the goal of that to protect the existing wetlands or to allow them to become a natural screen? If that's the case, then we've got to move further into the riparian buffers. We've got to look more at how we stabilize those waterways and those buffers. Those are critical. They are critical to the health of Dog River. Dog River has not long been removed off the 303D list of impaired waterways. We have got to protect all of the wetlands that exist there now in order to maintain that water quality and to improve it. We also request 2 separate mappings reflecting the buffer around all of the Dog River watershed, 95 square miles and 127 linear feet of shoreline be included, so that as we progress forward, we are asking for 100-foot setbacks to be established around all stream banks. We would be happy to help you. I've also provided a link to the City of Auburn zoning ordinance that you can see what they have done as far as their stream buffers. Again, the Open Parks and Space, we applaud you for your efforts. We applaud you. We know that you have listened hard. We've been a part of this process since day one. We know that the public has told you repeatedly that they want more and more green space. With that said, in looking at the green spaces reflected on the map, just like with the marina uses or the water uses, they are not in the peninsula area or in the Dog River watershed. We would like to see that map change to reflect that. Your Tillman's Corner is of grave concern to us with the heavy industrial use being laid for a future use there. We understand that those are commercial areas. We understand that that those areas exist and that the commercial people have to work there. But unless we know more about the stream setbacks and what we're going to do to help our riparian buffers, as it currently shows the threat to rattlesnake bayou and to the health of rattlesnake and what back my mind went totally Rabbit Creek are at risk, and those areas right now are very pristine and are worth keeping. So with that, we finally ask that you maybe think about delaying approval of this until the Dog River Watershed Management Plan is completed. It is in its final edits right now. It will outlay for you a number of the maps, a number of the items of information that you need to quantify and qualify your decisions. We are probably a month away from that being done because we are all in the edits now. So we respectfully request that that also be included. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lizette McConnell.
Lizetta McConnell, 328 South Sage Avenue, Mobile, Alabama. Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I am the NAACP president of Mobile County 5044. I am here today to speak on behalf of an area in my jurisdiction, Africatown. This presentation is a did you know, making you aware, and bringing it to your remembrance type of temperament. Number one, on February the 25th, did you know, this is one of the did you know, on February 25th, 2016, approximately 250 Africatown residents filed a lawsuit against the former IP, International Paper, for contaminating the water, the soil from the dioxins and furans, which are carcinogenic and toxic, hazardous to all living things. Research was done by Beheth Research and Development Lab, Inc., an environmental site assessment phase 1 was conducted, and the findings are proof and was used to file the aforementioned lawsuit that I just told you about. The NAACP has an executive summary of this environmental site assessment. We help raise funds and all to try to get the site assessment to prove scientifically of the toxins and all in the soil, the water, and the air in Africatown. 2, this is again making you aware. Africatown is a named historic location in the city limits of Mobile and is inhabited by predominantly African Americans. They are surrounded by toxic storage tanks and hazardous carcinogenic pollutants. Dilapidated, run down, unoccupied and occupied homes, some reside in and some cannot even afford to repair or redevelop. 3, on 4/6/2017, at the unveiling presentation of the map, I did not see any future repairing or developing of any of the land in Africatown. And that grieves me because they are part of the city. They have been listed on the National Registry for Historic. You know the storyline of Africatown. It's a community where it's part resident and part commercial, industrial, and it's been a fight for some time. I've been involved with it for the last 3 years. I was one of the ones that kicked off and started the No More Tanks on Our Banks thing that we did back in 2014 and 2015. So that concerned me when I went to the unveiling, and I look at the little colors and the strips and all that of the, you know, the plans and all. I don't see anywhere, and then questions and comments were also made on that particular day. One particular was Attorney Wanda Cochran, when she asked in regards to the Africatown residents, the underprivileged, the unfortunate, dilapidated area. Like, for example, Hog Bayou. I'm sure you're familiar with that. We talked about the waters and all this stuff, but right here in the city of Mobile, there's contaminated water. We have a Detroit, Michigan. We have all those things right here in the city of Mobile. And it grieves my heart to know that, as some of the rest of them have said, we're making future plans moving forward. But I'm just reminding you that there is a lawsuit already filed, and there are going to be some more that's coming in regards to repairing and cleaning up that area where residents were there first, and then the industries and all came in. And we're moving forward, we're beautifying Mobile, we're doing all these things, and we're not taking into consideration how many lives over generations have already passed on because of being contaminated, drinking water. Hearing the stories about it looks like it's snow in July because of all the toxins. Well, we understand. Then there was not all regulations and everything, and things just happened. But after the regulations occurred, we had people like IP that just fold up and left. And the area have not been cleaned, and people are still dying. They're still breathing these toxins and all. In conclusion, the NAACP locally, state, regionally, and nationally are watchdogs for equity and justice for all people. So please note, the NAACP will act as the repairers of the breach for the poor, and we know the scripture says the poor you will have with you always. We can't continue to just ignore them and just let them all die away. Going to my seat, please note again that the NAACP will make sure that Africatown is recognized, respected, and redeveloped to reflect its historic storyline, its historic registry, and historic value in the port city on the waterfront of Mobile, a great city to live and work. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Kevin Harrison. I think he's gone. Okay, we have some written comments from him.
It's very brief. It says that he submits these comments to the city staff and applauds the city for updating the major street plan and the future land use plan. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll repeat. I submit these comments to the city staff and applaud the city for updating the major street plan and the future land use plan. This will ensure that the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the city will be on the same page when forecasting growth in the Mobile urbanized area. And he's left some comments within his report.
Okay. Laura Jackson.
Hi, Laura Jackson. I live at 108 Hilltop Court, and I'm representing Mobile Baykeeper. First, I would like to say we applaud the city for moving forward in updating and strengthening its plans, codes, and regulations so that all citizens can be ensured a great quality of life and healthy environment to enjoy. Mobile Baykeeper has submitted formal comments, so I won't go into detail, but I will summarize a few general points. One, we need to have adequate waterway buffers for our creeks, wetlands, and bays. We recognize that the maps do incorporate some waterway buffers, but we would like to see these become better defined and structured in the actual ordinances so that their protection is distributed equally across different areas. Waterway buffers and other riparian buffers, referred to as, prevent erosion of stream banks, improve water quality by filtering and trapping pollutants. They reduce flooding impacts, provide habitat for animals, promote waterway as the destination rather than a ditch. We hope that this remains a priority throughout your process. We also highly request that low-impact development and green infrastructure practices be incorporated into the regulating ordinances. These practices are cost-effective and efficient ways to implement regulations that better manage wet weather impacts, such as stormwater runoff and flooding. These practices are already being implemented in cities across the U.S., including Daphne, Fairhope, and Atlanta. They create positive impacts for citizens' quality of life, the environment, and ensure that development and our growth takes place responsibly. Mobile deserves to benefit from these similar practices. We also request that the Dog River Watershed Management Plan is incorporated into these maps prior to approval. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Merrill Thomas.
Merrill Thomas. I live in Mobile, been here for 67 years, been in the commercial development business for 40. I support this plan. I think that the city needs to have a future land use plan. I think it'll make your jobs easier, the staff's jobs easier, my job easier. The community would be able to be part of this plan. But what I am concerned about in looking at the map, you know, I'm looking for details because being in the business that I'm in, this will affect my business. So when I look at the map, I see a category for water dependent. Water dependent along Water Street, fine. You know, Dog River, fine. But when you go out to Airport and University, and you have a purple water dependent, what is that? Or is it, or if it's not that, is it heavy industrial? I mean, it's purple. And then you've got the same thing at Hillcrest. These are questions that concern me because I don't know if y'all are planning on voting on something today. This map is different than the map that was presented in January. It has evolved, and I think that's a good thing. But I would like to see some clarity on, you know, before we go too far into it. And when I look at the street plan, you know, I see the minor arterial roads, which Dolphin Street is a minor arterial road. Dolphin Street, you know, what constitutes minor arterial? Is it the number of cars? Certainly not. And so there are just some questions that we've got that we would just like clarity on, or I would like clarity on. And I do just would request that you that we get more clarity and get more involved in this, and just support your efforts. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate all of the time that you spend. This has been a long day, so I'll be brief, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The last person we have signed in to speak is Jared White.
Good afternoon, Jared White, 1200 Dolphin Street. I'm here, I'm an attorney for Keep Mobile Growing. Our president, Steve Gordon, is also here, and I think it's signed up, so we're trying to figure that out. But I did want to briefly comment. First, thank you for your service to the Planning Commission. Also, thank you for the attention you're giving this matter. And Keep Mobile Growing supports a comprehensive rewrite of the zoning ordinance in Mobile. We realize that it's an antiquated ordinance, that it has some problems that need to be addressed. We also support long-range planning. And the city has a future land use map. It's very old. It needs to be updated. And so we're supportive of that concept. But we have a problem with adopting a future land use map today or in 2 weeks. And the reason we have a problem with that is that this future land use map creates 2 new zoning districts. It creates a waterfront zoning district and a water-related zoning district. And the Planning Commission, and ultimately the City Council, is being asked to make a decision on zoning without understanding what the zoning in those districts are going to be. I mean, the question I'd ask you is, do you know what the uses are, that are contemplated for that waterfront, the downtown waterfront district are, or for the water-related district? Has anyone told you that? Has anyone tell the city council that? Does anyone tell you what restrictions are connected with those? What the impositions are for those uses? So I think it's premature to adopt a map saying we're going to have this district without knowing what's going to happen in that district and what's going to be related to that district. So it would be our recommendation that this be tabled until there's a comprehensive zoning ordinance to review in connection with the future land use map. The other issue is the matrix, and I think that's even more problematic because you're saying we're going to adopt new zoning districts and then we're going to have a matrix as a gap filler. Now, I think I heard, and the acoustics here were great, that the waterfront district has been taken off the matrix, and I don't think the waterfront district is still on the matrix. So you're saying we're going to have a new zoning district, and we're going to have a matrix that tells us what uses are allowed in that district, but again, without any other details concerning those uses. I think that's problematic. It's a concern. And then there's the further concern, at least the matrix I saw previously only contemplated light industrial use in that district. And the downtown waterfront district includes the old Bender Yard, which is World Marine, now owned by RSA. That's a shipyard. It's heavy industrial use. There's limited space for shipyards along the Mobile River on our Deepwater Port. And the concept of making that no longer a permissible use, I think, is a big implication and something that needs to be carefully considered before any decisions are made. So I would also say, I think, and then there's a further issue with the matrix I have, which is notice. That was not part of the agenda for today's meeting. There was an add-on agenda when I arrived today. There's been changes to the matrix we didn't see till today. So I don't think, certainly there's not been a due process to allow the public to have input on that, appear, and really consider what's being proposed at this stage. So my recommendation would be table all this. Let's move forward with the zoning ordinance rewrite. If they want to roll out the modules and let there be public input as each module is rolled out, that's fine. But really, you can't evaluate it on a comprehensive basis till you see it all. And that's what I think needs to be done. So thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Chairman, we do have one gentleman who we think signed up on the, two people that we think signed up on the other regular sign-in list. So if y'all would
Yes.
bear with us and allow those two to speak.
Still Youngblood. Steve, are you going to want to talk? Steve Gordon. Okay.
Well, I know everybody's tired, and I'm not going to take very long. I understand and appreciate that there's been community involvement in this map, but this map is evolving at a very rapid rate. We've had very little opportunity to see the changes as they've been made. The mayor presented something about this to us about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Ms. Biko was there and other people, and that map has since changed since then. The street plan has changed somewhat also. So what you're being asked to approve isn't what the community has had the involvement in. It's the latest iteration of that. And so it needs to kind of go back through the process so that we can know what changes have been made to see if it still fits or does fit what we're looking at. Second observation is that the identification of zoning areas in some cases we think is somewhat inappropriate or needs to be, if we understood better what the ordinance would be that would govern it, then we could better understand whether that designation would be appropriate for those areas. I guess the best analogy I could give you is that an alligator and a horse are both four-legged animals, but they require a different environment. And so to just say, well, we're putting all the four-legged animals together and we're going to have a rule about who can ride them, it may not be an appropriate thing. So what I would like as a property owner, we own the property at the intersection of Airport and McGregor, is a better understanding of exactly what that designation will mean for us, but also how it relates to the next intersection at University Boulevard and Airport and at Hillcrest and Airport, why those are designated differently, as it was pointed out earlier. from best we could tell from looking at the map, they're called water dependent. That may not be correct, but there's definitely some color there that was impossible for us to compute. So if we could have some meetings, and we've designated Casey Pipes to be our representative in this matter, but if we could have some meetings with the people who are involved in creating this thing on our individual properties and our individual questions, particularly as relates to the ordinances themselves that would govern a particular area, I think we'd certainly be happy to get on board with it and support it. But as it stands, it's just not ready to be voted on as a plan because it just came up. It isn't finished, ready to be talked about in terms of approval. It's certainly something to be talked about in terms of, do we think you're going in the right direction? Yes, we do. All right, that's about all I have, and I appreciate your indulgence for letting me speak.
Thank you, sir.
Just a couple of points of clarification. The water-dependent use land use classification is that it's a land use classification. It's not a new zoning designation. It's simply a locational and spatial specification that helps us to inform decisions as we move forward with zoning. We have not specified what our new zoning designations or districts will look like. That will come to us in a very preliminary report that I indicated at the end of the year, where we'll start to see what the structure looks like. We've made we've derived at no specificity in terms of what the actual zoning ordinance districts or designations will be. These are simply land use categories that will help inform decisions around zoning. With respect to the coloring that you're seeing, the blue, I think that they've referenced it's an institutional land use category. So where you're seeing it near University, it's actually the University of South Alabama property. I'm sorry? Or suburban centers. And so at this scale, it's perhaps difficult to see, but if you take a closer look at that map, you'll see the distinction. The only water-dependent use specification is the area in the delta, and there's some small areas along the Dog River corridor. But outside of that, there are no other water-dependent uses that have been extended into the rest of the city. With respect to the matrix, again, it's a tool. It's meant to help with decision-making as we're trying to pull the land use classifications together with our current zoning ordinance. It helps to give us a little bit more clarity around areas that you've been asked to offer decisions or render decisions regarding zoning. It is not a zoning ordinance. There are no development parameters, no development specifications, no development guidelines that would be offered through that matrix. It just helps you spatially represent where these particular areas correlate between the future land use categories and the actual districts that are outlined in our current ordinance. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Shayla, on the street plan, how did the streets get into different named categories? Was it based on volume, or is there some kind of statistics that you use? Because I was surprised to see some of the streets considered minor. I think they were minor something or other. And I know that they have more than 40,000 cars a day easily.
The street classification or the functional classification system that we have used is straight from that is available through the Metropolitan Planning Organization. Mm-hmm. It may be that it needs to be updated based on conversations with engineering and traffic engineering, but the addition of the functional classification is literally a translation of what the Metropolitan Planning Organization has right now applied to our streets. They already have this classification.
And they could be old numbers.
They might be old numbers. It may be that they need to be reinterpreted based on new traffic counts and other interpretations.
But they were given a name based on volume, pretty much so.
I'll let Mr. Amberger address that.
Let me help with that a little bit.
Because I know we talked about it the other day, but I was not there.
When the word arterial is used, I mean, that's basically saying it's a major roadway. I mean, so to take the word minor, unfortunately, I guess it's kind of I don't know what it's called, but when it says it's saying minor arterial, but it's really saying a minor major roadway as opposed to a principal. It's engineering speak. I mean, it's engineering speak, and yeah, I mean, it could be defined another way, but this is, you know, the
yeah.
accepted, you know, federal state way of giving a nomenclature for a roadway. You know, so and it is a function of ADT on the roadways, but in no way, just because it says minor arterial, does it mean it's a little bitty street. It's clearly a large street.
Is it a designation that allows you to go for federal, state, or some kind of grants and things? Does it help you achieve those goals?
Yes, it does. And mostly what you'll see, or I guess you don't see local streets identified on here.
Right, like residential.
Right, and generally, most of the federal funds are not spent on local streets, the neighborhood streets, but all of these other classifications, you know, are typically open to various federal fundings that come available.
Thank you.
Shall, let me ask a question about the timeline. I think I understand the logic behind it, but that's been brought up several times about how we're phasing this in. And speak to that a minute and explain to us the logic behind that.
Well, it's meant to introduce specific content and also know that we're covering the entire city. So we're introducing elements based on specific geography, and it could be content as it relates to the code. So rather than give it to you all at one time and ask that you be able to render a good sound decision based on a big volume of work, the consultant has advised that he would develop it in a module. So he'd give us the first module, we would present it to you as an update in this environment. During that time, we would also vet it with the real estate community, with the neighborhood groups, with the environmental groups. Once we felt like we had good sound buy-in, then we would move to the next module. It's time consuming to be able to do it that way, but at the end of the day, our hope is that we don't have a thumbs up, thumbs down decision. You know that we have properly vetted it with the community and introduced it to you in incremental ways that all of us can absorb and be able to respond to effectively.
So at the end of this process, once all those modules are implemented, then we have our new plan.
Right, and then you will be asked to approve it.
Okay.
We won't ask you to adopt it a little bit at a time.
Okay.
But because there were changes.
But that's relating to the zoning ordinance.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Because there are changes even in front of this body, do you think that one more planning commission, if indeed, because we're hearing pushback and concerns, rightfully so, would another planning commission meeting for actually rendering the vote, would that be acceptable to the administration?
You know, we will take guidance from the commission in terms of what you feel most comfortable with. We feel like at this stage, we have tried to incorporate as many of the comments that we've heard, and I'm not 100% certain that, you know, we will ever be able to acknowledge and address every remark, every feedback that we've heard, but we've tried to do our best to provide to you and rationalize the comments that we've received and introduce recommendations based on what we've heard since you were last presented with the document from the consultant team.
Now, this doesn't create any new zonings. Currently, we still under our same zoning ordinance, and this doesn't affect any current property designations.
Correct.
And you've incorporated as much of the community groups, but Baykeepers and the others, Peninsula Group. I mean, we've factored in a lot of their concerns into this plan.
As much as we can, and what we can at this stage.
Okay.
With them,
I have a question. Looking at these resolutions and I guess the second to last paragraph, it says,
Yeah, you got to push your button down.
is the microphone on?
Yeah.
And looking at the resolutions, it says, you know, if we were to vote on this, we would be adopting these resolutions. What exactly does adopting them mean? Does that mean that we have endorsed them and then they become in the queue as a guideline for what's...
Alan, if you would please speak into the microphone, we can't hear you.
Okay, I'm a little convoluted over here in the corner. What I'm asking is, what does adopting the resolutions mean? Does that mean that that puts, we are endorsing the future land use map and the streets, and in doing so, does that mean that it becomes a guideline and it gets in the queue and actually becomes, public record that that this is in line to be the zoning ordinance?
If you adopt the resolutions, what it means is that the future land use map and the major street map and plans will become part of the map for Mobile and part of the comprehensive plan. It in no way adopts a zoning district, rezones property, changes anything with regard to current use of property.
But you got to admit, currently, the map for Mobile does have an influence on what goes on down here.
We use it as a guide in our staff reports and recommendations.
Right.
This further defines or implements the visions and goals that were set forth in the map for Mobile that were based on community input. Shayla, you?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. That's right.
It'd be like in your staff report in the past, it said, under the comprehensive plan, this area is designated A, B, or C. The future staff reports will say, according to this area is designated this. It's just a guide. It doesn't replace the comprehensive plan. It's still alive. This is just moving toward the final ordinance. It's not an ordinance. Adopting is just like approving that, okay, we're going to approve this as part of our new master plan, comprehensive plan, to work toward, to use as a guide to work toward the final product.
And the consultant will also be looking at this as he prepares the zoning ordinance to reflect appropriate uses within these land use categories. But again, this is not changing a zoning classification either in the ordinance or on the ground.
But it is a guideline.
It is a guideline.
And Shayla, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can still amend this between now and the zoning ordinance, or even after the zoning ordinance. It's still, or with it, yeah. It's approving it in its current condition, but you can still amend it in the future.
And that, when I refer to it as a living document, if we didn't amend it, if we didn't update it, if we didn't revise it based on current conditions of that time, then basically we'll have what we have now, a very outdated code that is not reflective of our community as we operate today.
Does the comprehensive plan, are we a recommending body and council final, or it stops here for a comprehensive plan? I know that the map of Mobile stopped with the planning commission, never came up to council. But what's the law on that?
The state code does not require that the council adopt the comprehensive plan. We did offer it to the council chose not to adopt it. We would like for the council to adopt it because that shows more support for the vision of this commission and the development of the city. The council will need to adopt the major street plan so that we will have one that is officially recognized by the city that can be presented to the MPO for the city to obtain that federal funding you were inquiring about earlier.
The state's code says that city councils may adopt comprehensive plans, maps, or other documents to assist them in their zoning duties, to keep them in their file, but no notice, no publication is required. The city council, at the discretion of the city council to do that.
Well, I just have one more comment. It does seem to me that this is probably the most critical point of the comprehensive plan. And so several people have made the point that it seems to be moving a little bit too fast for them, and I'd have to say, I think it needs a little more attention.
And I understand that. There's certainly a lot of information that's been provided to y'all today and 2 weeks ago at the business meeting. It's up to y'all whether y'all want to vote. Nobody's cramming this down your throat. If you want to think about it for 2 weeks, that's your prerogative. Think about it for a month. I mean, whatever. The administration wants to move this forward, but we certainly want to do it in the right manner and as y'all see fit.
How does that impact the time frame that y'all have planned with the consultants and the project and the work if we were to hold this over for 2 weeks or a month or anything like that?
Well, the timeline for the development of the new ordinance is tied to the passage of the major street and future land use plan.
Why
They're
is
tied
that?
together.
Why can't it work alongside as we're approving this? I mean, y'all aren't working on the zoning part as we're working on the future land use map?
Because this serves as a guide to inform decisions regarding zoning.
Does the map of Mobile not, is not the parent of the future land use map? And we're not using, I don't understand where we go from the map of Mobile informing us on decisions and being our guide, and then we have a future land use map to further inform us while we're waiting on the zoning. Why can't future land use map and the zoning come together?
It's not customary of the planning process. We like to have the specified land use categories locked in place as they will inform decisions around the zoning districts that are developed. So it's kind of like where we would be working with a moving target, in my opinion.
Can we adopt the master street plan? Can we separate the two items and get that moving, since that has to come up to council, and then look at a little more time since we heard some new changes to the comprehensive plan? I'm all about doing a comprehensive plan because we wait years to do it, and you do need that big idea behind, you know, your long-range planning. So
I see the two documents as linked. The land use classifications
stay together.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Bicko, I have a question about some of the items that were brought to our attention today. If several people mentioned the Dog River watershed plan and wanting it to become a part of this, I'm sorry, Mr. Hoffman, if we adopted today what you presented as changed from what we saw earlier, and someone wanted to change that, what would be the process for them to come to us and say, we'd like for you to, other than coming to the public hearing, is there a process for them to request that we review it again and consider expanding the?
It would be and so I will acknowledge that when the consultant advised that as we were moving forth with the development of the future land use plan, that we asked that any plans that were in the queue that we wait until we got past this phase. You adopted the Africatown Plateau plan prior to this effort. So the process for the adoption for any subsequent plans would be the same methods that were used for the adoption of that plan.
Okay.
And that's like the Village of Spring Hill and the Peninsula and Midtown?
Correct.
Do they have one that's come forward? Not yet. But there's others that have had some public exposure and acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But if someone wanted to, if a group wanted to come forward and say that, let's say the waterfront issue that we're hearing clearly from two sides of the aisle, if either side wanted to tweak it, do we go through the entire comprehensive plan in order to make changes, or do you just look at one area that makes changes to the comprehensive plan?
This may not specifically ask your questions, but if I take you back to Map for Mobile as a framework document, we intend to have subsequent plans that will fall under the Map for Mobile framework. And so within if I use the priority investment opportunity areas as an example, it's our intention over time to further highlight those areas, not just for the linkage between capital and planning, but to incur further studies of those areas so that we'll have a deeper dive as it relates to land use planning within those areas. So I see the water dependent or that geography being could be very similar approach for that area.
I guess I would say I don't see a reason why we would delay adoption of this resolution. I don't know that 2 weeks is going to make a difference. There'd be another batch of people in here in 2 weeks suggesting that there were issues with specific areas. There's no way, I think, for the city and for the consultant and the group that's been working for now over a year on this to capture every possible scenario. There are plans being developed right now in the city that will be different tomorrow because they're ongoing. This is a snapshot in time based on the best information and the most feedback that I think the process has been unbelievable. The feedback, the community engagement, I think we owe it to the process and to make a decision so that we can go forward and amend this plan as needed as we start to dive more into the details. I don't know that, I just think we're going to confront the same issues in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks, in 6 weeks.
Shallow, real quick, how many people from the community, our citizens, our neighbors, do you think have participated in these meetings over the whole process?
Over the whole process, thousands.
Thousands, okay. So we've had input from the community
Every sector of the community.
develop this plan that we're talking about.
Yes.
Well, but there does seem to be, and I'm glad, I'm thankful that the folks are here today and asking questions. It's a big deal and it impacts all of our lives. But I think there just seems to be some information that hasn't gotten out, concerns about the intersection at Airport and University and different things that have an impression that it's one thing, but in reality it's not. So, I mean, there just seems to be some questions that haven't been answered. But I think, too, that this is the first step, the first piece of the puzzle. It's not the complete plan. So, based on our history with it, all the meetings we've had, I'm okay with going forward with this first step and passing the resolution for the street plan and the other part of the plan. So,
Is that a motion?
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question about the matrix? So one of the speakers mentioned something about the, which section am I looking at? The downtown waterfront area and the uses for that, the office distribution, the light industry. And I just need a clarification because I think they mentioned the shipbuilding and the shipbuilding facility that's there now. Is that considered light industry or heavy industry?
That was one of the changes to the matrix. It does have I-1 and I-2 on it now for the water-dependent.
No, it doesn't have I-2.
Yeah, water-dependent uses.
It's gone.
Oh, but not
I-2's
downtown waterfront. But those uses would be grandfathered in. Well, I'm sorry. Again, this is just a matrix correlating the land use category to the existing zoning districts. It's not changing anything. Those uses are existing, they can stay, and then once the zoning ordinance is presented, we'll know what the actual zoning classifications are and what is recommended for that property. And if it is different, those uses would be in existence and they would be grandfathered in and could continue.
So on mine, I-2 is not marked as possible.
For which category?
under Downtown waterfront.
Right, in downtown waterfront, it's not. Water-dependent uses,
I'm sorry,
it is.
Yeah, it is I-1 and I-2 for water dependent.
Right, but I'm talking about the shipbuilding that's in the downtown waterfront area. Is that considered I-2 or I-1? I'm sorry?
It is heavy industry I-2.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is in that property where there is shipbuilding now, there could be no more future I-2. And, I mean, yes, maybe when we get to the zoning regulation, but right now, they're not allowed to have additional I-2 in that area? I'm confused.
The zoning of the property still would be, if it is I-2, would remain I-2. They would be able to use the property as it's currently zoned for any use that is allowed within that district. The matrix does not change the allowable uses. This is just a correlation of what we foresee the land use category, if this is approved, how it would correlate to the existing zoning ordinance.
But that's where I'm confused. If it's currently allowed in the existing zoning ordinance, but here it's not marked as being allowed, That's where I'm confused. So what, I'm missing something. I'm
Let me
sorry.
say this, and I'd rather go up and look at that map. All the actual waterfront, that's the port, all those BAE, Austell, all those areas, those are in purple. Those are heavy industry. Those, according to this map, will still be in that category, considered as a comprehensive plan designation as heavy industrial, I-1 or I-2. The downtown waterfront is that area pretty much from okay, if you start at the cruise terminal, the property to the south of that, you go there down to Virginia Street, back up to the interstate. That's downtown waterfront. And we had a rezoning in that area a couple of months ago, I think, that was wanted to go from I-1 to I-2. That is saying, recommending that for future uses, that should be, the highest is I-1, light in industry. Heavy industry, I-2 is not recommended for that particular area. That's part of kind of recapturing some of our waterfront, especially when the ramp comes down on Water Street, opening that from there all the way up to Virginia Street for newer development, kind of recapture our waterfront.
And this would really only come into play if there were, at this point in time, a rezoning application.
Okay.
It would be something we would look at and say, on the future land use map, this area is shown as downtown waterfront, and if the matrix is adopted in this format, the matrix does not illustrate as I-2 being an appropriate use within that category. That doesn't mean you can't do it. But it would only come into play if there were a rezoning application.
Doug, if you don't mind, this is something, since it's been presented in our file, would you please address this Senate Bill 477 in relation to how it interacts with our ordinances?
I don't have that in front of me. I'm sorry. I haven't seen that.
I do.
Agenda 21.
I will say before Mr. Anderson starts that when we were interviewing people to do this comp plan and zoning rewrite, we made them aware of the state law and the aspects of Agenda 21. So they came into this knowing fully the aspects and restraints that we face in Alabama regarding the UN Agenda 21.
And obviously, we've already got right-of-ways and easements and everything that's been established for decades. So, I mean, we're not really changing that guideline. We're just redefining and clarifying things.
Yeah, there was an email I got a couple of days ago about that ordinance, and we looked into it, and we're not doing anything that is against the law under that ordinance at all.
I do have one more process question, if you don't mind. When we get down to it, and we're taking the modules of the amending, of the changing of each zoning area, and at that point in time, we realize that the land use map that we've adopted for that zoning area needs to be tweaked because it doesn't quite fit the reality of what the zoning thing says. Will we at that time take the zoning, vet all the zoning modules and do all of that, accept that part of that zoning module and adjust the future land use map at the same time? Do you anticipate, Ms. Bicko, do you anticipate that we will?
Yes, ma'am. You could amend the future land use map to reflect what the proposed zoning is going to be, what the ordinance is going to be. You can amend it at the same time.
Okay. So, okay, thank you.
As Shayla said, the whole idea behind map for Mobile, future land use plan, major street plan, is that they're living documents. They're organic. We know over time they're going to change. And we anticipate that. You know, it's unfortunate that the existing documents were not really amended to any great degree in the 50-plus years they've been around. That has been an issue, and we are extremely excited about the new future land use map and major street plan and the subsequent zoning ordinance that will come from it. And we hope that y'all will consider adopting it at your
We need these are the two resolutions that we have here in front of us.
Yes, sir.
So we need to take these separately.
One is for the matrix, the other is for the future land use map and plan and the major street map and plan.
Doesn't matter which one we take first.
The map and plan resolution.
Before we get there, I'd like to say, I think everyone in the crowd is happy with the effort that we were trying to do this future land use map. But as a commission, we ask people to hold stuff over routinely with the smallest changes and nuances. And this is a document that's going to govern and predict our zoning moving forward. To not hold it over after the first time we see it and the first time the public has it in front of the commission, to me, would be irresponsible.
I would like to say that in our, personally, I wish we would keep the ball moving, because we're going to continue to have debate from here until forever. As a commission, we're on issues that are tough. We tend to keep holding it over, and we hold it over, and we hold it over until somebody's bold enough to just go ahead and say, look, we're tired of holding it over. Let's make a decision. I don't know if we're not going to get all groups on board in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, 20 years. So if we don't do it today and we do hold it over, at least be ready when we come back, if that's the case, that we just make a decision. Whatever that decision may be, let's just make a decision, and we're gonna all still be breathing and alive after the decision is made. So that's just my opinion. It's the commission's.
I agree with you, Carlos. And again, I think this is a first step. This is not the final 100% project completion that we're stamping into law for the next 50, 60 years. It's the first step to allow us to continue down this path. So factoring that in, factoring in the fact that we have had a lot of community involvement, we have had a lot of meetings and so forth, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the resolution for the future land use plan.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. We have 2 opposals. It passed. Is there another motion?
I'd like to make the motion that we also approve the resolution for the correspondent matrix.
Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposes?
Opposed.
Let the opposes be noted. Thank you. Pass. Is there any other business?
No.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.